So I get to the finish. Everybody's there. I round this corner and I can see everyone at the finish. Everybody is screaming. It's right there. I run across the finish line at a full sprint and I stand for about 2 seconds and then both of my knees just buckle and I fall on the ground. And it was like such an amazing feeling to have my soon-to-be wife, my kid, my whole team. We did it. After a full year,
Right.
we did it. And then I asked the race director who was standing over me, did I make it? The time, because remember, it's a 36-hour cutoff. She says, no, you're 20 seconds late.
So did you play sports in high school?
I did, yeah. So I was a bit of a late bloomer in sports. So I kind of grew up like a really skinny, undersized kid. And then like my sophomore year of high school, I found the weight room. And then realized that I don't have to be skinny and undersized anymore. And so I just went really hard on the weights. And then as the weight training picked up, so did my athleticism, or at least my curiosity for athleticism. So I started playing football right away.
Okay.
Got picked up by the coaches just from being in the weight room. They suggested I'd come out. So played football.
Where were you growing up?
So the first 17 years of my life, I grew up in California on the Central Coast. And so what it was like out there is not the traditional idea of what California is. It wasn't so much as like beaches and surf, but it was more like livestock, vineyards, cattle ranching, and things like that. And so
is
I grew
that
up
like
in
Fresno type, like that part of California?
Close. So I was about 4 hours south of Fresno in what's known as Santa Barbara County. And, and I grew up in Orchid, California. So just only a few thousand people there. But yeah, the big thing, man, it's wine country out there, and it's tri-tip and cattle ranching. And, you know, every place is famous for something.
I did a knife show in Santa Barbara one year.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God, was it gorgeous.
Oh, Santa Barbara's beautiful.
Dude,
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So I lived an hour north of Santa Barbara in this cool little town. And, so, yeah, in California, I did football in high school, and that's also where I started, like, my rodeo career as well.
What did your parents do?
So my dad was a long-haul truck driver.
Okay.
To back up a little bit, though, my dad is an immigrant from Mexico, so he came to the U.S. at 7 and spent the first half of his life in the fields and doing that kind of work, and then transferred into his long haul truck driving, where that's kind of the only thing that I remember him doing.
Okay.
And then my mom worked for the school district. She was a senior secretary for the junior high there.
Okay.
Yep. And so my dad would be gone like 6 days a week, running trucks up and down California. And then my mom did all of the raising for my brother and I. And then my dad came home on Sundays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think the truck driver profession gets, I mean, I know it doesn't get enough respect. I mean, when you look at the time spent away from family, the conditions on the road, the fact that everybody's pissed off that they're there, you know, honking at them, trying to get around them, slowing up traffic, like the hours spent, and the fact that nobody really, I shouldn't say nobody, but people just in general don't really realize, like, if the trucks stop running, everything is over.
Everything.
I mean, when you look at COVID and how the store shelves emptied and how fast that all happened, and then think about what would happen in a real actual emergency if like, say, fuel stations shut down, right? And trucks couldn't run anymore. The entire nation is dependent solely on truck drivers. Like that one profession. I don't know if any other profession just went away, maybe police officers, if things just, but even certain areas of the country would do fine without police officers. Like, they'd somewhat self-police it.
I think so too, especially places like Montana.
Right. Like, we'd be all right. We'd handle it. Not to denigrate police officers. I think they're important, but like, we'd be okay. Other places would go all the way to hell. Sure would. But truck drivers are the one profession that would end the nation in a week.
And I don't think they also would get enough credit for how difficult the job is too.
Yeah.
You know, I think about, like, I didn't see my dad a ton as a kid because he was always on the road. When I would see him come home, he would come home typically on a Saturday night, and I remember him, like, so many times it would just be passed out on the couch.
Yeah.
Just dead tired and exhausted from driving as much as he did. And then he would wake up Sunday And he had a side job as well. He had a side hustle of selling firewood. And so on some Saturday mornings, he'd get up early, he'd grab me, we'd get in the truck, and we'd go up into the hills, and we would cut firewood all day, and then bring it back to town and sit in a parking lot until, you know, somebody came up to the window and told us where to take it.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's like some of the greatest memories I have of my dad, was just how much he was willing to sacrifice for his family.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think guys like that get enough credit.
Well, and you also, when you see trucks pulled over, especially in our part of the country, they're pulled over in a chain up area and they're putting chains on.
Yeah, man.
You know, a whole bunch of tires.
Yeah.
You know, chains are heavy. It's cold. You're rolling around in the snow.
Yeah.
Cars are flying by, spraying slush on you. Like shit, man. It's a tough job.
Yeah.
It's a tough job. So, you know, when you're playing sports in high school, and then at what age did the rodeo start?
Well, I think I was about 15. Okay. I'm going to take you back to probably 2002-ish. Right. I'm about 15. I'm at this state fair, past Robles Mid-State Fair. And, I get on this mechanical bull with my buddies. I'm like half cocked at 15, probably not the best thing to be doing.
Yeah.
But we all get on the bull one by one. Right. And so I get off this mechanical bull, and I kind of think to myself, like, man, like that, I'm actually not terrible.
Yeah.
You know, like I actually did better than I thought. And so my next thought was, well, maybe I ought to try the real thing here.
Yeah.
And so, so this is like the beginning of like the whole thing. But I remember going back home around that time, and this was like the early days of some of the internet, and maybe even like technology as a whole, at least from my standpoint. So I was trying to figure out, like, where can I go to learn how to do this thing? Where can I go and get on some bulls, or have somebody kind of show me around?
This isn't something that you probably went home and got a lot of advice from your dad on, is it?
Well, that's the thing. My dad was actually a little bit more supportive than my mom, because my dad, in his younger years, alongside of working in the fields, he was also in the rodeo as well too. He was a saddle bronc rider.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually a pretty well accomplished saddle bronc rider in the 70s.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he was actually kind of excited about it, but my mom maybe not so much.
Yeah.
But man, it was cool. I actually went to this old Western store. It's called Romer's, all right, and it was like Western apparel and tack and stuff. And I'm like, hey, who do you know that rides bulls, or like has any idea of what this is? And they're like, well, you know, there's this guy here in town. You know, you can maybe give him a call. So they gave me his phone number. And
You're 15?
I'm like 15. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, exactly. So I call this number, and I'm like, hey, I'm just this random kid who's kind of looking to get on some bulls. You know, is there anything that maybe you can show me or tell me or point me in the right direction, more or less? And he's like, well, you know what? If you want, you can come out to the house here. I got some work to do today, but maybe in the afternoon we can have that conversation. And so I go out to his house, which is at the end of this dry, dusty canyon road. Like, I felt like it just took me forever to get to. And I get there, and there's like a bunch of livestock. There's like a rodeo, like a small rodeo ground, a couple bucking chutes, and I'm like kind of confused still as to where I'm at. So I go to helping this old guy, and we're putting up fence, trying to separate cattle, making pens and this and that. And I'm busting my ass, and it's hot in this canyon, and it's summertime. And we get to that point where we take a break, and I was thinking to myself, like, okay, this must be it. I got all my work done. I'm gonna get on some bulls. And so we so we started having this conversation about it. And I was like, okay, so like, what's next?
So do you at this point, do you just plan on like whatever bull he runs in, you're just going to get on it?
Or
are you
naive,
hoping
man.
he's going to bring in some, some light bucking smaller bull, or are you just like, whatever you got, bud, put me on?
I still am so naive to things that I didn't really know what to expect.
Had you been to a rodeo before?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay.
Rodeo is part of that culture in the area that I'm at, but
yeah.
I didn't know what to expect. I just knew that like I was going to do whatever he said. And so I asked him like, okay, are we going to get started or whatever? And he's like, yeah, we'll get started. And then instead of like taking me to go and get on bull, he takes me up to his like weight room or his exercise training room. And I go into this room, man, and I'll never forget. There's a few pieces of like old dumbbells and old gym equipment or whatever, but I look up on the wall And all I see are back numbers. You know what I mean? Like rodeo contestant numbers just for days. And these old black and white photos you would see like in the 70s where they're like all raw and grainy, just everywhere. You know, you could totally tell that like this person has some kind of history in the sport because it's just apparent, you know? And that's kind of where we started, was not getting on bulls at all, but actually just like going over the mechanics of what it would be like if I was to get on a bull. You know, what my shoulder should be doing, where my posture should be like, what about my free arm? And when a bull goes to the left, what should my free arm be doing? And then to the right, what it should be doing. And that was kind of like my introduction. And it took probably, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks of just coming out to this old timer's place and working all day just to get a little bit of coaching in the afternoon from him.
He was smart. He was getting some work out of you.
He sure was. He knew what he was doing, right?
Yeah.
Well, the cool thing about this whole story is at the beginning of all of this, I didn't really know who the guy was. And when I finally came to find out, I saw this really cool photo of him holding a buckle and a saddle. And in the background of the photo was a banner that said NFR. Now, for those that aren't listening or familiar with rodeo, NFR is the National Finals Rodeo. Mm-hmm. Well, come to find out, this man who's been coaching me and working with me and putting up with, you know, my lack of any kind of wisdom or knowledge at a young age is Gary LeFew.
Oh, really?
Yeah, world champion bull rider in the 70s.
I'll be damned.
Yeah.
That's wild. You just, I mean, it's amazing how lucky you got just randomly finding that guy. And
having him be the foundation of that sport for me, like, was so just like one in a million. You know?
Really cool that he even took the time at all to even just, and I mean, I'm sure it was his way. Like, if you'd have not enjoyed that first afternoon or thought it was worth your while, you wouldn't have come back. But so he wouldn't have had to waste any more time with you. But it was really cool that he even just, you know, took the time at all.
Yeah.
To just take a random phone call from a random kid.
And not to mention pour 2 years of himself into me and like my introduction to the sport.
Is that what it was? A couple of years?
Yeah, 2 years, and then I moved away from California.
Okay.
But you know, I'm really grateful for that time in my life. That was also my introduction to the power of positive thinking and having a positive mindset. You know, because during his career, that was his big thing that he always focused on, was mindset. And so that was my introduction to it as well. And I think that having that as a foundation at such a young age, I've always kind of resorted to that, using my mind to push myself through different sports or activities that I've been doing, or even just life in general. But that was all thanks to him.
So what was that coaching before you even got on? What mindset, what stuff did he talk about with you?
I think the biggest thing was fear and doubt, and the understanding that it's okay to have fear, but it isn't okay to have doubt. Because with fear, you can still think relatively clearly, and you can still choose to move forward with fear. That's okay. But it really gets dangerous when you doubt yourself in those moments. You doubt yourself of showing up to the rodeo. You doubt yourself while you're in the chute, warming up your rope, getting on and all of that, taking your wrap and such. That's when it becomes really dangerous. And so the idea with him early on was, how do I separate the two? How do I feel fear or whatever it is, but still continue to move forward? And so there was like a lot of different tactics and things that we discussed around those two main things.
Yeah, because fear in that space, and in a lot of spaces, you can also, that kind of crosses over into, there's a fine line between just sheer terror and being scared. And then there's a fine line between fear and respect.
Sure.
I mean, you better have some respect, and that respect probably is based out of some fear. And if you don't have any fear at all or no respect, you're also probably just crazy. I mean,
sure.
You know, if it's involving bulls, you can't tell me that there's not. Even guys at the highest level today have to have. Well, I mean, why do they run?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you're fearful that if you don't run, you're going to get stepped on or smashed or whatever.
Absolutely.
But there's a difference also between some fear and just being terrified, which probably comes into doubt. If you're terrified, then you're probably full of doubt as well.
For sure. And how do you shift your way of thinking away from the doubt and the sheer terror into a place where you can still think clearly enough to know what you need to do in that moment? And that was also something that like came with time, but that we also would touch on is how do we redirect in those moments? And I think one of the biggest things that I remember is separating the emotional side of things from the logical side. And that was the first time that I really understood what emotion and logic was from him. Mm-hmm. So when I'm in that heightened state of emotion, how do I shift away and get a little bit more logical as to what the next step should be? And that was, for me, the easiest way to shift away from all of the doubt that I was feeling at the time. Because there was a lot of it, man. Like I was just like kind of a young kid and not really knowing what to expect came with a lot of doubt.
It's interesting we're having this conversation because I've actually talked about this with my son quite a bit in the last couple of years, especially this year. So he's a freshman. Last week he was going into his first high school basketball game, first game of the basketball season, and this conversation started his first day of practice. But I knew he was talented enough to be on the starting five on the basketball team. But that's quite an accomplishment, and it's a big thing for somebody to get as a true freshman walking right in.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I would ask him just kind of, here and there we'd be talking. I'd be like, who do you think we already know who the best basketball player is on the team. So I'd be like, who do you think the second best basketball player on the team is? And he'd be like, probably me, and it wasn't at all in an arrogant way, but it'd be like, probably me. And I'd be like, yeah, probably so. And we'd talk about why and whatnot. But then he would be going into practice, and then throughout practice in those first 10 days of the season, like wondering, is he going to make varsity? Is he going to be on the starting five? How much is he going to get to play? And I would hear so much doubt in his voice about all the reasons why he might not be.
Yeah.
But like, it was very clear to me that like he should be, And I would tell him the only way that he's really not going to start and play a lot in varsity is if he lets that doubt creep in too much and it begins to actually affect his play. And now you give coaches a reason to not play you because you're allowed. Because he's always been a kid that experienced a ton of success in his playing career from a kindergartner on. He was always big, strong, fast, talented. There was never a doubt at his age, right? But then, because he was always playing kind of with his age level and he was just obviously better than everybody else at those levels. But then all of a sudden you're a freshman playing with kids that are 4 years older. It's not obvious anymore, right? And I always would tell him, and that's one thing I would see sometimes in struggle, like in high school football games this year. If it's not going perfectly, I'd see some doubt creeping in. And I would tell him, like, if you see Steph Curry miss 6 threes in a row in the first half, when he shoots that first three of the second half, do you think he has any doubt? He's like, no. I'm like, no. And he's going to shoot. If he misses the first three in the second half, he's going to shoot 7, 8, 9, and 10 with just as much confidence as he did number one that day. Yeah. And that's why, like, then he starts making shots in the second half because he never loses the doubt. But you see young kids especially, but adults as well, lose that doubt where he can sit there. And he was telling me, like, I'm making shots in basketball practice like crazy. The minute it's like in a scrimmage and he's thinking that he's playing now for his spot, he misses some shots.
Yeah.
And I was like, your talent didn't change. The only thing that changed was when you were pulling that trigger, you're wondering, is my coach going to be mad if I shoot this? Should I shoot this? Should I pass to Eli? He's better than me. What if I miss? Am I going to lose my spot? And I was like, when you're just playing around with your buddies and you're hitting 7 threes in a row, you don't give a shit when you're shooting that shot. Nothing. It doesn't matter. You're just playing. It's like it's all the power of your mind is making you make or miss those shots.
Yeah. And that's actually like a really liberating idea too, because if it's all just within my own thinking, well, that's awesome because I can change that if I so choose.
Control it.
I can control that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It isn't something that's outside of my control.
Right. Height is outside of your control.
Sure.
Power, strength, speed, some of that is outside of your control.
Right.
You're just not fast enough.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care what you think. If it's the 100-meter dash and you're 3 seconds slower.
Right.
Like,
that's obvious.
But
the idea of just having a short-term mind and taking the lesson from the missed shot or whatever, but still continuing to shoot, that's within your control.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing in rodeo and bull riding and all of that too, is like, if I get bucked off today, well, that's okay because I got another one tomorrow. I may have to drive 4 or 5 hours to get to it, but I can choose to reset the counter if I so choose and continue to move forward at this next one with a clean slate.
The challenge is, though, for a bronc rider, bull rider, basketball player, we can have those chats. Me and him can have those across the table, and he's like, yeah, and he's all in, and like, I get it, I got it. And then second quarter, and he's sweating, and he's going hard, and he misses 4 shots, right?
Yeah.
And like, and I can't walk out there and just have a quick conversation, right? Like, when your adrenaline's high and you're actually in the moment, how do you teach another person or a kid, you know, what are those mechanisms or something that you can give that kid to be like, to check themselves? Because you can't do it for them.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, this actually is something that my daughter and I do regularly. And we did it a lot when she was in gymnastics, which she did at a young age for about 5 years. She was actually really talented in the sport. She won 3 state championships. She did wonderfully. But one of the things that we would do is before the beginning of each event and at the end, she and I would make eye contact. And in that eye contact, I would do one of a couple different things. But I could tell really quickly if she was anxious, if she was a little bit nervous, because she would like bite her nails or she would do little things like that. And so one of the easiest things that worked for us is when we made eye contact, I would just tell her to breathe. I think that's one of the easiest things, because when we're in that heightened emotional state, we're not breathing slow. We're not taking our time. We're rushing through everything, and we're forgetting a lot of the most important things, which is just being right there in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like what you were talking about when you're just shooting with your buddies, you can make a ton of shots because likely you're more in the present moment in that time. And so what worked well for us was just to be able to settle down for a moment, catch your breath, come back to that present moment. Let's not get too future focused.
Right.
And then she would go out there and do her thing and ended up being very successful with it.
Mm-hmm. So what was that? What was set the scenario and the scene of that first bull you got on?
First bull that I ever got on was still summertime in 2002. And I have it on video, actually.
Really?
Grainy old VCR video that my buddy Justin took.
I wonder if we can get that and play that over the top of this.
I think I have it.
Really?
Yeah.
Henry, we might have to do that.
Yeah. I know where it's at. My mom had it on cassette or VHS, and then she converted it to a DVD. But anyhow,
yeah.
I remember getting on this bull, and the bull's name was 12. And I remember 12 because he had these like big longhorn style antlers on him that just kind of like turned up at the end. But I remember all he did.
It's already intimidating enough to get on a bull, but now this bull actually has horns, because not all bulls have horns.
That's right.
So now you're sitting on his back staring at horns.
That's right. And that's the only thing I see. And I remember I had Gary's son, Judd LeFew, who was pulling my rope for me and keeping my thoughts in the right place. And I remember taking my wrap. I remember nodding. And then that was the last thing that I remember.
Yeah.
And then the next thing that I roughly remember is just like running in the arena away. But if you're watching the video of it, man, I think I maybe got like 4 or 5 jumps.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, 4 or 5 jumps, and then clicked my heels and went ass over tea kettle. But that was my first one, and I was hooked.
If you made 2 jumps, that's pretty good.
Right.
Because
yeah,
most people that go, especially in their first several rides, you see them, they're looking for the exit door as the gates open.
Oh, yeah, man.
And
yeah.
I might happen to know somebody, I'm not going to say who, but like I see that happening with this guy.
Yeah.
And it's like, your heart and your mind is not in the right place. Like, this isn't going to work for you, bud, because there's 7.5 more seconds of this shit.
And it's like doing planks, man. Like, that time just takes forever. It takes so long. But I had a good coach.
So you were hooked. I mean,
right away, man.
Yeah. The adrenaline had to just been unbelievable.
Yeah. And it was cool, man. And so that's where it started. And that was the cycle that I continued to repeat with Gary out at his place pretty much every weekend. After school was out, I would go to his house. I would stay for the weekend. We'd work the first half of the day, and then we would get on the second half of the day.
Yeah.
Sometimes we would ride. Sometimes we would just go train on the barrel. We would just work on mechanics. Sometimes we would talk mindset. There was a couple other guys that were living out there at the time too, so we would all just get together and ride. But it was cool.
How many rides do you think you went before you made 8 seconds?
That's a good question. A handful, maybe. I know that I didn't come right away. It didn't come right away for sure. But I remember the first one that I did cover for 8. It was just this old Red Bull. I can't even remember its name, but I remember getting the whole way. And see, the thing about it is if like you go to some of this old footage, Gary was never behind the chutes. Gary would be like in the crow's nest, just looking down, yelling at everybody from there on things. And I remember landing, getting done. That was my first cover, and having him yell at me from the top of the crow's nest. And that was a cool memory, man.
Yeah, I bet.
It was really cool. Yeah.
So did you do a rodeo that first year then? Did you go compete?
My first year of high school rodeo competing was the fall of 2002, and my first rodeo in high school was at Cal Poly University, so San Luis Obispo, California.
Yep.
That was the first one that I did, and I continued on until I left California my junior year of summer. So I did 2 years of high school rodeo in California.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty successful at it?
Yeah, I went state finals both years. Again, having a good coach made all of the difference because I was getting on bulls more often than most kids likely were, just because of the access I had.
So you were getting on more bulls and you actually had legit coaching.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a hell of a combination for a kid.
Yes.
Having access to practice bulls is a big deal.
Big deal. You know, and when I left California to come to Montana, summer of 2003, that was kind of like my biggest worry was I didn't know what that scene looked like in Montana. I didn't know if I was going to be able to get on any practice bulls or, you know, what the rodeo scene was. But as luck would have it, I came to live with my uncle outside of Kalispell. And, man, wouldn't you know it, his neighbor became the first friend I ever had in Montana, who was also a bull rider, who also had bulls at his house and an arena. And I showed up to his house like one of the first weekends I was there, introduced myself, and we started riding practice bulls every single Wednesday night.
Really?
I was able to just like seamlessly transition from California to Montana like that. It was cool.
So why did you come to Montana?
Well, my mom lost her job in the school district.
Okay.
And my uncle already lived up here. And, you know, we'd been coming up in the summer and in the winter, so we had a good idea of what Montana was like. And he just said, you know, why don't you just come live with us?
Your mom came with you?
Yeah. So my mom moved my little brother and I up to Montana. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of cool because although I didn't know what the rodeo scene was going to be like, I had heard that there were more opportunities for rodeos. Mm-hmm. So to give you an idea, in California, we had one high school show a month. Well, in Montana, I come to find out there's 2 to 3 shows a weekend.
Yeah.
And so, man, I could just pick and choose wherever I wanted to go. So combining that with getting on practice bulls each week, I was right in my element the whole time, and it was a really easy transition.
Was the Montana stuff still high school rodeo, or was it just just typical rodeo stuff that we normally think about?
Yeah, I was doing both. At the time, I was still in high school, so I still did high school rodeo. But then we had this they call it like an open rodeo series, meaning anybody could enter as long as you're over 18. Mm-hmm. And so there was like a winter series and a summer series going on. And I remember my first open rodeo was at a summer series in Columbia Falls called the Trumbull Creek Rodeo. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I think one of the longest standing rodeos in Montana, summer series. Mm-hmm. And man, I remember going out there, it was July of 2003. And I remember the announcer, somehow they found out that I wasn't from Montana. Maybe it was like a puka shell necklace that I was wearing and just didn't fit in with people here. But,
California kid.
Oh, man, I had the puka shells. I had like my shirt unbuttoned, you know, a little swag to me or whatever.
Yeah.
But they found out. And I remember taking my wrap, and the crow's nest was right above the chute that I was underneath. And the announcer just basically kind of mocking to the fact that I wasn't from here and I was from California. And I heard it. And I remember like really getting under my skin.
Did you bear down a little bit?
Definitely bared down a little bit. And, you know, it was cool because being mocked for not being from Montana really kind of irritated me.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of bared down a little bit, like you said. And, man, if I didn't go out there and win that first rodeo.
Really?
and just had such a great ride in front of everybody, in front of the announcer and everything, man.
That's awesome.
I got a check that day for, gosh, I don't even know, maybe like couple $100.
Yeah.
I never cashed it.
Really?
I still have it.
Really?
I never
That's
cashed
awesome.
it. I put it in a picture frame, and I wanted to remember that moment forever.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, yeah.
So, when you're a senior in high school, is like rodeo pretty much like what you're going to be a bull rider for the rest of your life? Is that pretty much your mindset at that point?
That's really all I had going on. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like I said, I was playing a little bit of football in California. I showed up to Montana a little bit too late for football, so I just was sticking with rodeo and wrestling. And I didn't get any offers for football,
Mm-hmm.
but I got an offer to go to do college rodeo in Colorado. They were going to pay for my school and everything.
Okay.
So that was the only offer I had, so I took it.
Yeah.
And the fall of 2004, I picked up my stuff and I moved to southeastern Colorado, and I did college rodeo at a school down there.
Is that like Lamar?
Yeah, Lamar, exactly. You know
Really?
it.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
my family ranches in Los Animas, Colorado.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Just not far from Lamar. And then my buddy went to horse training college in Lamar, basically.
Well, that's exactly what I did too.
Really?
Yeah, running lopes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did the horse training and management program. Did the college rodeo for that team down there,
That's cool.
and that was 2004 to 2006.
Okay.
Yeah, that's cool. You know that school. I wasn't expecting you to know that because I didn't think anybody knew about
Nobody knows where that's
Lamar.
at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, there's not much there.
they have a Walmart.
Yeah.
We have a Walmart.
Yeah.
So,
No, Los Animas, Colorado, Lamar, that's, southeast to pretty much east of Pueblo.
yeah.
Yep.
And kind of close to the border there, actually.
Yep. Yeah. It's super dry, hot,
Oh yeah, man.
super cold and windy in the winter.
Yep.
Can be. I mean, it's a lot like eastern Montana, but even drier and
Yeah.
can be even more desolate sometimes. I mean, because my family still ranches there. My uncle does still the family ranch down there. So
Gosh, Los Animas. I haven't heard that name for a long time.
yeah.
That's cool.
So what was your plan going through college of what you were going to do after college with it?
So while I was in high school and doing the college or the high school rodeo and such, I was also working on this ranch in Whitefish, Montana, training horses.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of where like the idea of going to school for this also kind of fit in together.
Mm-hmm.
And so my plan while I was in college was I'm going to ride out this rodeo thing as long as I can. I love it. I'm doing pretty good. I'm entered in some PRCA shows. I'm doing the college shows at the same time. I'm training horses, making a little bit of money. So that was really all I wanted to do. You know, I think that every young bull rider who's like really going after it has aspirations of becoming a world champion.
For sure. Yeah.
Right?
You want to go to the finals.
Absolutely. I want to go to the Super Bowl. I want to get a ring. I want to get a buckle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
were you staying pretty healthy?
that was the thing I think that has separated me throughout my entire career in athletics is at that time in my life, working out and training for a sport, especially rodeo, like that wasn't cool. Like nobody really did that. So
Right.
in my circle of athletes and other bronc riders, bull riders, I was the only one that was training, and they kind of teased me from time to time, but man, I really was staying healthy throughout that whole process.
And I will say it's interesting because you're only talking about what 2005 at that point.
2004, 2005. Yeah.
That's not that long ago. I mean, it's
Yeah.
20 years. 2004 doesn't sound like 20 years ago.
Yeah, man.
It seems like 5 years ago, but we're not talking the olden days, right?
Right.
But today, I know, several rodeo people, they all train. I mean, Richie Champion was just in here. He's a bareback rider. He's going to be in the finals. He was leaving here. He was going to go home, make sure he got his training in for the day. Like, training is just commonplace now in rodeo. I wouldn't, definitely not 100%. There's still some of those just cowboy tough kids that they're just a piece of jerky on the back of a bull and they're just flat tough.
Right.
But training is, and like he said, I mean, or it was him or somebody else was saying, I mean, a lot of those guys train together. They go hit gyms and stuff on the road together. There's just so much science behind training and coming back, preventing injuries, and then also recovering from injuries, which you're going to get injuries no matter what.
Yeah.
in that sport. But
yeah, and it's so important, man. And that's something that like I've been doing for a long time, was just the training aspect, and just realizing that like when I was training, when I was stretching, when I was focused on my mobility, I covered more bulls, man.
Yeah.
Like I made a little bit more money. Like I was staying relatively injury free. You know, I mean, I would still get like the normal stuff.
Well, and you know, there is luck involved in, you know, whether you have a bull that steps on you right in the middle of your chest or steps on your leg and breaks your leg.
Right.
I mean, no amount of training. But that being said, if you're training and you're staying on bulls longer, you're getting out of there in a better, you know, you're getting out quicker, you're getting out in better shape.
Yeah.
You know, you're not ending up under the bull as much.
Yeah, right.
That's also going to prevent injuries where the next guy is, you know, ends up right underneath of a bull.
Or pulling a groin or busting a shoulder, you know,
Yeah.
because I was focusing on the mobility piece so much. Like I didn't have any of those like nagging injuries.
Yeah.
You know, so really grateful for that.
So you were going to go into horse training and do some of that after school then?
Yeah, that was my intention. You know, I worked on that ranch in Whitefish for this native couple training colts. And what I focused on in school was those first 90 days. Like, give me a 2-year-old that's only been halter broke, and let me put that foundational work to him.
Yep.
And I really loved that. And, you know, I was at the time in school, like the way that the program works is they would bring you a 2-year-old that was only halter broke, and then you would do everything with this horse. And then at the end, there would be like a show at the end of the semester, and you would go through like a traditional reining pattern.
Yep.
And the owners of those horses would be there, and then they would you know, congratulate you or give you a nice little tip for your work, and
Yep.
and that was what I wanted to do, and I just really fell in love with the process of taking a young animal who had no formal training on it outside of its instinctual, and then being able to take it through a series of,
Yeah.
you know, a process there, and I loved that.
It's interesting, and I'm not good at it, but I've watched. I have a couple, well, Josie that went to Lamar,
Yeah.
and then my other cousin that's just born and done this stuff forever. He has a business starting colts, I mean, down in Arizona. You can see the progress, the training so fast with a horse. Like, you know, you take a tarp with a young horse and, you know, wave it up by its face, and it'll throw its head back, and it's trying to rear back and get away from it, right? And you shake that tarp around for just a minute or so and start touching it with it and whatnot, and you'll see that horse calm down, like in that moment, like in that spot. It starts to learn to trust you, trust that tarp's not going to eat him.
Yeah.
And it's amazing because they also are right brain and left brain, where you take that tarp around to the other side of them and wave it, and it's like it's a new tarp.
Yeah.
It's wild, but you can see the progress. And the next day, you'll grab that tarp. Maybe they shake their head a tiny bit, and then they're better. And it's like the progress with training with those horses can be incredibly fast.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And I think that like if I look at my entire life, I've had so many different types of jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked at like Taco Bell and Macaroni Grill, and I've been a snowboard instructor. I've been a horse trainer. I'll tell you what, man, the jobs that I had where I was teaching somebody or something, that's when I felt the most alive, the most like on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted more of it. And so all I wanted to do was train horses. I wanted to ride bulls. I wanted to train horses. You know what I mean? That was it. And that just
So
felt
what
so
happened
good.
after school then? What'd you end up doing?
Well, you know, I told you I wanted to be a world champion.
Yep.
Come to find out, I didn't want to be a world champion as bad as I thought. That classic story, because at that time, like I was mentioning, I was doing pro shows, but I was also doing college shows. And being on the road all week, more or less, outside of my classes and such, and going from one show to the next, I just really quickly realized that, like, man, this isn't the way that I want to.
It's a grind.
To do it. Yeah, it was just so much of a grind. I was the only one of my traveling partners who had a vehicle. So not only were we going to all of these rodeos together,
you were driving.
I did all the driving. I did all of the motel reservations. I did everything for these kids, for all my buddies. And so, yeah, that just got to be a grind to the point where I simply fell out of love with it.
Well, and it is financially. I was actually telling Richie this. and I hate to say this because it's not entirely true, but I feel like rodeo has become, not necessarily in bulls, but in a lot of it, almost a rich man's sport. And the reason I say that is like, if you're going to compete at the highest level, roping, running barrels,
sure,
steer wrestling, if you don't have a horse that can go like and is trained at the highest level, like you can go do what you did and rodeo to a certain point, a certain degree, but to break through, like I would encourage anybody, go Google the standings in any of those events, in calf roping. Go Google the standings in bull riding and look at what the number 1 guy's making and number 15. So
sure.
15 makes the finals. Go look at what number 20 and 25 are making.
Yeah.
And the drop off between the 15th guy who just barely qualified and the next 10 guys, which if you're in the top 25 of anything in the world, you're good. Like of anything.
Sure.
If you're one of 25, you're damn good at what you do. And those guys that are number 25 are making, 50 grand, 45 grand, traveling, putting money into it. The good thing with rough stock, you're not owning your own horse and, hauling them all over the country, but you are not a rich person. And you're also not the guy getting the sponsors. Like, right. I don't imagine Wrangler was knocking on your door back then.
No. Everything was financed on my own, which is why.
So there's a dedication to that's really incredible, that those guys, to break through to number 15, unless you're just unbelievably talented, like God-gifted, talented, to go from number 25 to 15 that's a major leap.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And to even get to 25, I mean, from where you were, whatever you would have been, I'm sure you weren't even ranked, right? I mean, you're one of tens of thousands of people that are trying to do that.
Yep. I was still coming up.
Right. How do you go from that level of dedication from there, and then imagine being number 16? Like
right on the bubble.
You missed the finals by $200.
Yeah. That's heartbreaking.
Oh.
And I've been in situations like that in other areas of my life.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Oh yeah. And that is one of the most heartbreaking places to be in that moment. But again, like we talked about earlier, man, it's all about your mindset and your ability to be able to reset after a heartbreak like that and still choose to move forward.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes a guy powerful. That's what makes a guy unstoppable.
And rodeo has a lot of that, because even for the top guys, it doesn't matter who you're sponsored by. You get stepped on and break your leg and your season's over.
Yeah.
You have to hit that reset button mentally.
Yep.
And then get that doubt out of your mind that you can get back on a bull or a horse and do that again. Like, just because you made the finals 4 years in a row doesn't mean when you're coming back from your shoulder injury that you're going to be there again.
Absolutely.
I'm sure those guys all have that doubt after 9 to 12 months of recovery of climbing back on something. Like, they don't feel like they did the day before they broke their shoulder.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So when I cut you off, but you started having that doubt in the bull riding as a career.
Yeah.
Where'd you go from there?
Yeah, I remember it was summertime. I was in at a practice pen in Pueblo, Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember thinking to myself, like, I got off this old little black bull and had a good ride on him. But I remember thinking to myself, like, you know what? I think I'm done. Like, I think that was my last one.
Really?
Yeah. And I made that decision there in Pueblo. And, from there, I went back home to Montana and I regrouped. And I told you, fitness has kind of always been the thing that I'd been doing since high school. And so I remember being in a gym, and I remember going up to the front desk and asking the person at the front desk, like, hey, are there any, positions open, maybe as like a trainer or something, because I like to teach.
Yeah.
And I remember her telling me, she said, well, do you have any certifications? I had no idea what certification was for training at the time. And she's like, well, you have to have one to work.
You're like,
here.
I'm in shape.
Yeah. Like, isn't that enough? You
Yeah.
know? And she's like, no, you have to have a certification to work here. So I went home, and it's a little bit later, and the internet's kind of in a better place than it was when I was doing the rodeo thing. So I started looking it up. Found a school in Colorado again called NPTI, National Personal Training Institute. And so within about 3 or 4 weeks, I picked up my life in Montana and I moved to Colorado Springs, Colorado. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be the next thing I do.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent 9 months at NPTI there, and I got my certification as a personal trainer. I took that. I went back to Montana and I started the process of opening up my own gym, and now I'm going to be a personal trainer.
Yeah.
And that was the next chapter of my life.
Mm-hmm. So how do you just open your own gym fresh out of school?
Well, that was what I was trying to figure out myself, man, because again, like at this time, I still really have no idea of how the world works. I just know that I'm curious enough to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And so I found this facility that was offering just the equipment for sale. So it was like roughly $40,000, all of the equipment, and then you would rent the building. I'm like, sweet, that's a perfect little setup for me. So I put together a business plan like they taught me in school. I got the binder, the page protectors, I got the income, expenses, everything. I take it to the bank, and they're like, this is great, dude, but you have no credit history.
Yeah, you've been a bull rider.
Right. So I'm like 20 or 21 at this time now. And they just said, sorry, man. Mm-hmm. And so instead of buying that gym, I ended up working at it for about a year and a half as a personal trainer. And that was my introduction to personal training. This was, I'd say, 2007, 2008, right in there. Mm-hmm. So that's where I started training and helping other people with that. And so that's what I did for the next, I would say, 3 years before we had that big economic collapse.
How did you do transitioning from the adrenaline and the excitement of riding bulls to, like being in a gym and working personal training? Because my wife's done some of the personal training stuff. It's not bull riding.
Yeah.
And it depends on who you're training. I mean, that's the one thing that drove her a little bit crazy was like, your success as a personal trainer also depends on the motivation and the drive that the person you're training has. And there's varying levels of degrees of that.
Yeah. So along with the personal training, I was also approached in a local gym by this big dude who played football for like a semi-pro team. And he's like, hey, man, like you look like you're in shape. Why don't you come play football for this team? Mm-hmm. And so alongside of the personal training stuff I was doing, I started playing semi-pro football for this league called the RMFL, the Rocky Mountain Football League, for a team that was actually in my hometown.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of how I filled that athletic itch, or that athlete itch of mine, was through football.
I kind of remember, I feel like that kicking off. Like, did it go on for a few years?
It did, yeah.
I feel like, didn't Missoula have a team?
Yeah, Missoula had a great team. They were called the Phoenix.
Yes.
Yep.
You're right.
Missoula Phoenix.
That's right.
In fact, Frenchtown also had a team for a couple of years.
I do remember that.
I remember coming down and playing at the Frenchtown football field.
I remember getting asked to play.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. But I was not anywhere near as athletic as you or whatever. I mean, I was fairly athletic back then, cool. But not at a level that I thought was worth going out and busting myself up over, because I knew I definitely wasn't going to be. I was probably going to be the getting run over on the field. But.
Well, and let's be honest, they weren't paying us,
right?
So like,
right,
you kind of had to choose.
And I was also making knives full time, and like, I'll be honest with you, like health insurance wise and stuff like that.
Sure.
Like, all right, if I go get hurt and I can't work, I even remembered like backing off how much I was even going to like open gym and playing basketball. Like, man, if I blew a knee out or got an injury, or because I used to play open gym basketball every week,
Okay.
And we'd get after it. And I remember just kind of like, once I had 4 kids, they were young, I'm making knives one knife at a time. And it's like, man, if I do something and I get hurt, I remember that being a concern of just like, if I don't make knives for a month, because we're month to month paying bills. It's not like I had a big savings. So it was like, if I can't work for even a month, we're in trouble, Well,
you're a lot smarter than I am, because I didn't have any of those thoughts. I just went after it, dude.
Yeah, well, you got on bulls and I didn't. So, and I remember even talking with my buddy in high school. We even talked a little bit about like steer wrestling. Like, that looks like fun.
Oh,
like,
heck yeah.
That'd be a blast.
Oh, yeah.
But we stopped short of actually doing it. I don't know that I really had access to it exactly, but I could have if I had pursued it. Like, I had people, but I didn't have what you had, which was like, I'm going to go do this.
Yeah.
You know, we just were like, we were more talkers, not doers.
Well, you don't even have to have a horse nowadays, man. You could just go and do some shoot dogging. You know, that's kind of become a little bit more popular over the last few years.
Yeah.
And that's fun to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I imagine the shoot dogging, which, I mean, I would do that today. It sounds
Heck
like a freaking blast.
Heck yeah.
But the difference between shoot dogging and climbing off a horse at 30 miles an hour onto a steer,
just lay it off the side.
that's a different deal.
No doubt.
Yeah. It'd also be handier to be a little bigger too. Those steer wrestlers are pretty big dudes.
Big boys.
Most
Absolutely.
of them are pretty big.
Do you ever do rodeo, or do you ever get on a horse or a bull or anything?
No. I always say I sit on a horse. If I have to ride it,
Yeah.
probably in trouble.
Fair.
We've got a couple horses. My wife really goes. She went team penning last weekend.
Oh, cool.
She likes to ride. I'd actually like to learn to ride better, and it's really kind of a time thing and just a commitment thing if I would commit to it. But
Of course.
I've always envied it. I always think it's really cool. I think it's a lot of times people watch it, but like really don't give enough respect to the amount of work and talent it actually takes to do it. I mean, there's so much little nuances to it, and so many little technique things and whatnot. Like, you're not just holding on to a bull as tight as you can, you know, to a bull or to a horse or whatever. Like, there's so much fluidity to it, and
Yeah, it's art.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. It's a dance, really.
Yeah.
In the rough stock stuff.
Yeah, no doubt, man.
But yeah, so you were playing football, working at the gym.
Yeah.
How long did you play football?
I played in the RMFL for, 2007 was my first year, and I think I went all the way until like 2012, 2013, somewhere in there.
What position?
I played wide receiver and kick and punt returns.
Okay.
Yeah, so I played for a team in Kalispell. I think the Glacier Knights. I had to think about that for a second. It's been so long. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did that. In that same time frame of playing in the RMFL, I started to develop more into a football player and an athlete, and had another great coach, guy by the name of Coach C. And that was his name, Dave Cervantes, but to me it was Coach C. And he was one of those guys that like you could just tell had a passion for coaching, because the way that he would coach you would be completely different from the way that he coached me.
Sure.
But what was the same was that he got the best out of both of us.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, this guy's a professional.
Yeah.
And so I remember when I first started playing for the Knights, he was my position coach, and just really made a guy feel like he was like he should have been there. You know what I mean? And so I really just took to him under his wing, listened to everything he said, and really developed as a player, and got to the point where I thought that I could play somewhere else. And so he was ex-SWAT from LA, moved to Montana, and so he had connections down there. Well, he put me in touch with a couple coaches down at community colleges in California, and I interviewed with a couple of them, and I ended up moving back to California in 2008 to go play football at a community college in Los Angeles at Cerritos College.
Okay. Under
the recommendation of Coach C. And, you know, I think that like without his guidance and leadership early on with that team, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't have had that opportunity, but that was a really cool chapter as well.
When you were headed down there, what was the goal? Was it to try to, I mean, you probably weren't looking at that community college as an academic play. This was football, right?
That's it.
Were you thinking you could maybe go beyond community college and get into did you have eligibility left at a bigger college?
Well, see, this is the great thing. At that time, the NCAA didn't recognize rodeo as a collegiate sport.
Oh, really?
And so when I got to the community college level, I had 4 years.
No
I had
shit.
4 years, yeah.
Okay.
And so that actually worked out in my favor.
Yeah.
So the intention at that point was, yes, football first for sure. But then I got down there and I realized like they actually have a really respected exercise science program. And remember, I'm already a personal trainer. So I thought, well, maybe that goes kind of hand in hand with what I'm doing now. And so that's what I went to school for down there.
Okay.
So moved to LA, played football there, moved my position from wide receiver to slot receiver, Completely different game speed, by the way. Let me just say that right now.
Really?
In Los Angeles versus Montana.
Totally. Oh, God, yeah.
Completely different game speed. So
yeah.
I definitely wasn't as fast on this team. So I moved to slot position, which actually worked out well because my strength as an athlete is my ability to catch the ball, not so much yardage after the catch.
Right.
And so I just kind of became that guy that on shorten yards or whatever we need a catch, first down or whatever. I was the guy for that job. Kind of like a Wes Welker type.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Welker was fun to watch.
Oh yeah, so good, man.
You know, Brady always seemed to have that guy.
Yep.
There was Wes Welker, and then Julian Edelman.
Yes.
Was like a Wes Welker.
Yeah.
Carbon copy.
Guys that you could just dependable.
Yeah.
Didn't drop the ball.
Yep.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, if it was 3rd and 6, he'd run a 6.5-yard route, turn, catch ball, go down.
Yeah, we don't even have to think about what the play is. We just need to get him the ball right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I did well at the community college level, and I actually got to that point to where I had a pro day, and got invited to go try out for an arena football team, and ended up getting signed that day with that team, and that was kind of my transition out of community college to the arena football scene.
Sure.
Which was really cool.
So now I don't know anything, and I was pretty into sports. I mean, for all those years I was working as a custom maker, I spent a ton of time, pretty much every day listening to like ESPN radio. Right?
Yeah.
So Dan Patrick Show and all that stuff, I know nothing about the Arena League. I know I've turned it on TV, and it's odd. They're kicking the ball off of the screen, and they're hitting guys over the boards, and it's fast. The receivers are getting a running start.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It looks fast as hell. It looks like it's tight.
Yes.
It would be an entirely different kind of game that would lend well to some people and really not well to others.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
And you said it right there. It's a lot faster and it's a lot tighter.
Yeah.
So here's a few of the things that I noticed right away, man. Number one is you have a route as a receiver that you're supposed to run, but that route doesn't necessarily mean that, at 3 yards, you're going to cut in at a 45 and then you're going to run up another 4 yards and it's a 7-yard route. It's more like find a hole in that general area by running that route, quote route. You know what I mean? So nothing is like sharp or crisp. It's kind of like find a little hole because it's so much tighter. So that was the first thing I noticed. I couldn't run my normal crisp routes. Mm-hmm. The second thing that I noticed is the first catch I ever made was at the tryout. And I remember as soon as I caught the ball, it went right through my hands and it hit me directly in the helmet. And when I picked the ball up, I realized why. Well, the ball is so much smaller.
Oh, are you serious?
The ball is smaller than what it has been my entire career playing sports.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I didn't either. That's why it hit me right in the face.
So it's not an NFL football.
No, it's much smaller. It's much smaller. Yeah, and so that was...
God, why would they do that on a smaller field? You would think like a small ball you'd throw a long ways if it was a huge field.
Yeah, but so it wasn't necessarily like tiny. I should correct
yeah,
that,
but if you're very particular, I mean, if you're a pro, you put a baseball bat in a baseball player's hand, and it's an ounce off, I'm not noticing. Right. You're probably not noticing, but a baseball player will.
Professional will notice.
Yeah, so
no doubt.
if you've been putting your hands in a certain position your entire life, and all of a sudden it's a 1/8 of an inch difference, that's going to make a huge difference.
As soon as I picked it up, I felt it, and I'm like, wow, this is much different. And then the other thing you really got to get used to is, the position that I was playing was what's called a high back receiver. And those are the ones who run at the line of scrimmage. And that took a lot of timing for me to fully understand, because you'll be in the backfield and quarterback will basically just wave you forward. And as soon as he waves you, you start taking off full speed. And so timing the snap of the ball with you crossing the line of scrimmage can take a little bit of getting used to as well.
Yeah.
And so, it was a lot different for sure.
Does the Arena Football League pay decent?
It did. Yeah.
Did it?
So you would get like a base salary.
Yeah.
And then you would get a win bonus. And then you would get per diem.
Okay.
And the cool thing with this team is they had bought a hotel basically and transformed it into housing for the players. And so that was another added benefit, is you would just live on, quote, campus, and you would just, get shuttled to and from practice unless you had your own vehicle, which I did. So, but they had everything that you needed there. They had all the training facilities. We had a a separate practice facility from where we played our games. And, they paid for your food and everything as well.
Okay. So, I mean, you could save a little bit of money doing that.
Totally. And this was in Billings, Montana.
Oh, the arena team was?
Yeah.
Oh.
So this was the Billings Outlaws.
Yep.
Billings Outlaws.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do they still have a team?
I think for a while they did. When I separated from the Outlaws, they moved to Washington. So basically everybody disbanded after the arena blew down in a tornado.
Yeah, the Met, right?
The Metra, yeah. So that was the last year that I played with them. And it was interesting because it was actually right before the championship game that tornado came through, blew it down, and there wasn't enough time to rebuild it, obviously, before that. So the championship game was played at the practice facility in 2010.
Okay.
Yeah. And then after that, insurance didn't want to rebuild it for the next year, so everybody just took off.
So, really just like in the NFL, as a receiver, I always think about this, and it's really it's every position on the field, really especially on offense. It kind of starts with the quarterback, because like if you have it starts with the line, but the line play and the quarterback, right? But everything's dependent on those two entities doing well. And I think to myself about amazing running backs in college, amazing receivers, even amazing quarterbacks. But if you get drafted to a team that's got a shitty line, and you can't tell me that all these first round top 5 picks that are quarterbacks that have failed at the Browns or the Lions or wherever over the years all suck, right? Or all are incapable. But they got into a situation where maybe coaching wasn't good. Maybe the GM and the organization was a dumpster fire. They had a terrible offensive line, but like, when you came in as a receiver, you're dependent on someone to get you the ball. Like, you can find your safe or your space in that zone and turn around and wait for the ball. And if it's not there or they miss you, it's hard for you to be effective as a receiver. Did you have a good quarterback? Did you guys have a good team?
We had a great quarterback, Chris Dixon. He came out of Humboldt State in California. He had already won a few championships at that time in the arena space. And so he was an excellent quarterback, great leader, knew what he was doing, could fire the ball at 1,000 miles an hour and put it wherever he wanted. So he was excellent. And
did you find it amazing that a guy like that can't make the NFL?
The interesting thing about that is he could have gone. And
really?
in the arena space, you get a lot of bounce backs and you get a lot of guys that go up, So like throughout the season, I remember guys would leave and get on a practice team in the NFL, or we had a couple guys that would bounce back, So like, It isn't so much of a stretch to say that he couldn't have done that.
Yeah.
I think that maybe the one thing that he probably didn't have going for him was his size.
Okay.
Because he wasn't a big guy by any means. He didn't really have the height. He didn't really have the stature. But in terms of like game awareness, he was excellent.
Yeah.
He knew where the ball needed to be. He knew where the defense was. He was excellent. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Just didn't have the size, man.
Did you ever get close to feeling like you were getting any looks to go up to the NFL or not?
No, definitely not. No.
Not fast enough.
Not fast enough, and I think that maybe my game might have been just a little bit too one-dimensional. Like I said, like what I did best was I was the possession guy, so I didn't really have the flashy speed or the open field move or anything like that. So I think I just didn't have enough to be more of a...
and size. I mean, not that you're a small guy, but like those dudes in the NFL, the size will just blow you away. Yeah, I mean, my playing weight was like 200, so I was 6 foot 200 pounds as a receiver in the NFL. It's pretty short.
It's pretty small.
It's not the weight necessarily. It's the those dudes are 6'4", 6'5".
That's right.
And it's just bonkers.
That's right.
It's mind blowing. You think you're around big people, or somebody that plays football that like, oh, you should be a lineman in the NFL. You're big, and then you see actual NFL linemen, and you're like, oh,
yeah, different.
That's a big human.
Even the talent level. I remember going from college to arena football, and in college, like everyone's pretty good, and most people are pretty good, but you get to arena and everybody's damn good. It's like, oh, okay, this is another step up. This is a completely different level here.
Yeah.
there was nobody on the arena team that wasn't talented, that wasn't good.
Yeah.
And the hunger, I noticed the hunger at the Arena Football League was more than at the college level.
Well, it's people's livings.
Sure.
Like in college, if you get a scholarship, pretty much it's your scholarship. They're not really going to peel it away from you.
Yeah.
They sign you on a team and you're not what you think you're supposed to be. I mean, they'll cut you.
Yep. Quicker
because in Arena League, I'm sure there's probably no guaranteed contracts or any of that, is there?
Yeah. So you sign a contract at the beginning, but that contract says that they can let you go at any point.
Right.
But I think another reason why people were taking it even that much more serious is because you had the opportunity to go up.
Yes, it's the prove yourself league.
Right. And so like there would be times where we would have scouts and people from teams coming in and just sitting and watching practice. So, everybody is just extra hungry at that level.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. It was a cool experience.
The other thing with the size, what people don't understand is the speed that comes with the size. Like a lot of us know big people.
Yeah.
Tall or just big, massive people. But then you see at, my cousin coached football and really more at like the Bobcats and Grizz, the 1AA level or whatever they call it now, FBS or whatever the hell it is. Yeah. But he got to help out at a camp for Alabama. And just as a coach down there going and helping with drills and stuff in the summertime, a high school camp. And so these are all high school kids that are on this field trying to catch Nick Saban's eye. Right. And he's watching these guys run by at practice. And he was like, the speed and size of the dudes that were running around on that field, all just trying to be the one kid that got a phone call from Saban. He's like, in Montana, like we'd have taken them all.
Yeah.
Like everybody on that field, everybody that got invited to that field isn't going to, U of M or MSU. I mean, we have some talented kids here for sure, but he's like these dudes that are massive bodies that are moving at an incredible rate of speed.
It's so impressive.
350 pound, 320 pound, 330 pound guys that are running down running backs. It's like, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's impressive, man.
I look at like Derek Wolf was in here. He played for the Broncos for so long as a D lineman, and he's a massive guy. And then you watch. I've seen some highlights of him and stuff, and he's chasing down quarterbacks. And I'm like, that dude can run that rate of speed. It's scary.
That's a scary human.
It's a scary human.
Heck yeah, man.
Yeah. So coming out of, when that arena team disbanded, and I don't know if we missed anything in between, but like with your playing career, like kind of what do you do now? Did you try getting picked up by a different arena team or?
Yeah, that's always something that I've thought about. Even now, I think that I was dating a gal at that time. We had just kind of started dating at that time, and she had a young daughter. And in my head, I was like, okay, well, perhaps this is the end of football. And so what I ended up doing is I ended up just moving back to my hometown and started raising her daughter with her. And kind of like started that phase of my life instead of, trying to go and get picked up by another team. Mm-hmm. And what I meant by, I think about it sometimes is like, well, maybe I didn't give myself enough credit there. Like maybe I didn't turn over every stone with football. Like maybe there was another opportunity. But I chose to go back home and settle into a life and raising her young daughter. And, man, I couldn't have made a better decision.
Yeah.
Because that young kid and I, 15 years later, are like this.
Really?
We are the closest pair that you could imagine.
Yeah.
And so I have been pouring my heart into her for the last 15 years, man. And it's been amazing.
That's awesome.
I know I made the right decision.
And you and her mom are still together?
No, we're not. Unfortunately, We're not together. We separated when my kid Daisha was about 9.
Okay.
And so we've been separated for quite a few years now.
Yeah.
But her and I still see each other. The daughter and I still see each other regularly.
That's awesome.
In fact, we're having lunch again tomorrow. So
that's cool.
Yeah. So it's been a really special thing. And like I said, I definitely made the right decision there.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a selfless decision. And, football, it sounds like, though you might have signed another contract, maybe played for a couple more years, like probably wasn't going anywhere beyond that from the sounds of it.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. I think that
You found your peak kind of with.
Yeah. And I think that I was okay with that, because my goal really wasn't, I didn't really have aspirations of the NFL, and maybe that was just because of the obvious, right? But
Right.
I wanted to just take it as far as I could. I think one thing that I know about myself is that like I'm so curious as to finding out what all I'm capable of doing physically. I've expressed myself through my athleticism with my body my entire life, and so if football isn't the thing, well, what else is there? And so when football ended, well, I started exploring that curiosity until I found the next thing. And,
so is this when the kind of the ultra running started kicking off?
Actually, that's after,
Okay.
that was much later. What I ended up finding next was, I had a client, a personal training client, who came to me, and she like had her phone, and she's like, "Hey, watch this video. I think you'd be kind of good at this stuff." And so I'm watching it, and it's American Ninja Warrior.
Okay.
And I'm watching this girl like do all these obstacles, and I'm looking at it like, oh, I think I might be able to do that, or I don't know about that one. And so I started building obstacles and going to like playgrounds and just swinging around on stuff and just kind of like testing it out and seeing what it was like. And what I realized is that I have this really raw set of skills here. It isn't anything refined, but like I kind of have some pretty decent grip strength and such. And so
I can only imagine somebody driving by and seeing you out on the playground. This is a grown ass man.
What is he doing here? This is so weird. Yeah, man. And
he identifies as a 6-year-old.
Just swinging around on stuff. Going
I
down
think,
the slide.
don't we all kind of wish we could just go to a playground once in a while and just play and not be judged?
And that's what I loved about American Ninja Warrior. It was just a big ass playground. And so I gave myself to training and competing for the next 5 years for the NBC show American Ninja Warrior.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you? I mean, you said you trained for that for the next 5 years. Did it take that long to get on it?
No, actually, that's I got on the first time
right away.
that I applied.
Okay.
Yeah, which came as a shock, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah.
I built those obstacles. I threw together a chintzy audition tape, which is still on YouTube somewhere if you find it.
Yeah.
It's so cringy.
Find it. Henry's
prepare to be embarrassed for me.
Henry's Googling away over there.
Yeah. So I put it up, and I wasn't even really expecting much, man. Like I was halfway training just in case. And then I remember I left Walmart one day, and I got a call from like a 562 number. Had no idea who it was. And they're like, "Hey, this is so-and-so with American Ninja Warrior." And like my heart drops. I pull over, and basically it was what's known in the ninja community as the call.
Yeah.
I got the call, which is, we want you to come out to so-and-so place and compete on the show. Congratulations.
562, is that New Jersey?
It's LA.
Oh, it's down in California.
It's based in LA, but they do Ninja Warrior across the country, and they basically group several states together and call it a region.
Okay.
And so my first year, they told me to go to Kansas City, Missouri. This was Ninja Warrior season 7. And so
are they filming there, or are you just kind of still trying out?
No. I got on the show, and they're filming it.
Okay.
So when I got there, I got to Union Station in Kansas City, and the whole thing, man, all the stuff was set up. The lights, the cameras, the obstacles, the everything. And
Did you get a little nervous?
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah.
So nervous.
Yeah.
So nervous because first off, it was so new to me. Second of all, I went by myself, because I guess in thinking about it now, like my parents and friends were probably like, "Oh, this is just another one of those things that Dan does."
Yeah.
So I went down there by myself.
Because nobody thinks of that. I mean, I'll just be honest, as just a regular dude that turns on the TV once in a while. I don't think of that as a job or a career.
Yeah, right.
Right. Like a thing to make money or to support yourself, because I just don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
I've just seen it on TV, and there are certain things you watch that we all watch, and we're judgmental because we're like, I could do that. And there's certain parts of it that are like, yeah, if I worked on getting in shape a little bit again, like I could do that. And then there's other parts where I'm like, yeah, I couldn't do that.
Yeah. And that's the funny thing, especially with Ninja Warrior, is when you're watching it, there's so many times where even I've done it, I'm like, oh man, come on, man, you could have did that.
Yeah.
But then you get up there, and what you don't realize from watching it on TV is that those obstacles are 20, 25 feet off the ground.
Yeah.
And so
there's a height thing to it.
There's a height thing to it. There's so many different factors that make Ninja Warrior challenging that don't include the obstacle.
I don't think TV can really show that very well. TV, you can't see the depth perception part on TV. Well,
and here's a few thes. Number one is when you're watching the show on television, it looks like it's filmed at night. Like it's got dark sky lights. It's a really beautiful setting. The fact of the matter is that it's filmed at 2, 3, 4, 5 a.m. And you've been on set for 12 hours at least. You've been there early and all day, and you're not allowed to leave. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is that if you're new to the sport, you go last, which means you're closer to that 5 a.m. mark. So you've been out there all afternoon and all night and all early morning. Not only that, but you've got all of the lights. You've got the live audience. You've got the fireworks that are going off as soon as you jump into an obstacle to try to throw you off. You've got all of these different little subtleties that they kind of build in for the dramatic side of the sport.
So how did you do on your first go at it?
Well, I'll tell you, I walked up to the start, and if you're familiar with Ninja Warrior, the very first obstacle is always what's called the quintuple steps, and it's basically 5 steps that are spaced evenly across from each other, and they're all at about a 45-degree angle. And the idea is you have to laterally jump from one to the next.
Yep.
Right?
One of those that doesn't look hard.
No. But it's sequencing them all together that can be challenging. And I remember as I got up to the line, cameras are on, and they do an official buzzer countdown. So it goes beep, 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 and then you go.
Yeah.
And I remember as the buzzer was counting down, I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is what I do. I can do this. I've been here before. And as soon as the beep went for me to go, I freaking blacked out.
Really?
Blacked out, man. Just like that first bull that I got on.
Yeah.
I completely blacked out. But I tell you what, I came to, and I was through all 5 of the quintuple steps, and I'm on to the next obstacle and thinking what just happened? I don't remember it at all.
That's wild.
I came to at the second obstacle, and I remember from there, everything just kind of flowed. And I got to the last obstacle, which is always what's called the warped wall, and it's basically just this wall that starts off at a curve, and then it goes up to about 15 feet or so. And man, if I didn't get to the top of the wall and hit the buzzer and turn around, and I've got the 2 announcers off on my right who are yelling at me, congratulating me. I've got smoke all around me. I've got people on their feet cheering for me. And it was just this moment where I'm looking down on everybody and everything, and I'm just thinking to myself, I don't know what just happened, but it was one of the most liberating feelings I've ever had in my life.
Really?
Yeah, because I was coming out of a really low spot in life after losing somebody really close to me. And that was my first time of feeling something other than this deep depression that I was in at the time.
Yeah.
And that moment is very special to me.
Yeah.
It was almost like I finally won.
Right.
Right.
And
it was a really good feeling.
Wow. That's cool. Who did you lose going into that?
You remember I was telling you about Coach C?
Yeah.
So, we lost Coach C in 2013.
Okay.
And that's a tough story too. I went to visit him one morning and at his house, and couldn't get inside. He wasn't coming to the door. Ended up having to break the door down to get inside, and I was looking through the house for him upstairs, calling his name out. Went downstairs, and he was in bed. And so I was calling to him, hey, Coach, wake up. And I pulled the covers back, and he was already gone.
Yeah.
Which was the start of that deep
right
depression. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So
that's tough.
So like I said, standing on top of the warped wall 2 years later, after everything that had happened to me of gaining 30 pounds and calling off the engagement that I had to my kid's mom at the time, to moving back into my mom's house and spending all of my money, like trying to buy back my happiness and, trying to get some sort of stability, I felt like a bit of redemption from when I was on top of that warped wall. It really finally felt like I had won.
Sure.
It was a really good feeling.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So how does that Ninja Warrior work, right? Like, okay, so you won that episode.
I finished the course.
Okay, you finished.
Yeah.
So, do you have to come back and do it again to try and beat somebody's time?
Yeah.
And you say you did this for 5 years. So what does that process look like?
Yeah. So anytime they have like an airing of the episodes, so they do it once a year, and they have like a regional qualifier is what they call it. So again, they take a certain amount of states, they group them all together, and then they have one regional qualifier at a place.
Mm-hmm.
There's 2 nights of competition. The first night is the first 6 obstacles of the course that end with the warped wall.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that it works is everybody runs the first night. If you complete the course, congratulations, you can come back and compete the second night, but it's single elimination. If you don't complete the first night, and if you fall or whatever, then you don't come back at all. Nice job, but we'll see you next year.
Right.
So there's always 2 nights of competition. From there, whoever finishes in the top 10 or 15, they might have changed it now, go to the national finals in Las Vegas.
Okay.
And so it's basically one qualifier and then the national finals.
Okay.
And so every year nobody's guaranteed the next year. So every year you're training and competing and having to submit a video to the network as to who you are, your story, why you would like to compete. And then
so even though you'd been on it and done well, you still have to go through that process?
Yep. You start back at 0 every year.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's part of what makes it challenging is that piece right there. Nobody's guaranteed anything.
Did your videos get better?
They did. Thank God. They did get better, and they did pick me again too with a much better video. Which I think they're all still up somewhere out there.
Yeah.
But the videos got better. My athleticism for ninja stuff got better as well. So I was getting on like more regular obstacles and had a little bit more skill attached to them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you came back and after you did that first one, that first day, then so you're saying you went back the next night and competed again?
Yeah, went back the next night and competed. So this would be like the finals round. Okay, So now you do the first 6 obstacles, and then you do an additional 4. And they call that like the back half of the course. And so the back half of the course is always more challenging than the front.
Yep.
Okay, so we had a lot of water that night. It rained a ton, man, and we were filming. Then we'd have to stop, and we did this like start-stop thing all night. And I got to the 5th obstacle, and I was it was called Bungee Road, and it's basically where I'm holding on to a set of bungee cords in each hand, and I have to swing from those bungee cords to a big like pipe that's down at a 45-degree angle. And the pipe is about, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 feet in front of me. And so I reached out to grab that pipe, and unfortunately I wasn't able to hold on to it. It was just really wet. And so I slipped off of that, and that was the end of my first season.
Sure.
But it was cool coming back to that finals round. And
do they pay you for appearing, or do they pay you for finishing, or?
I think it might be different now. Then there was no payments or nothing. And the only thing that you were really given was like airtime, and not everybody was guaranteed airtime either. So there was no payment, and what's kind of a bummer is they don't allow you to get the footage from your runs either. And so
was yours aired?
Mine was kind of aired. So what I mean by that is like they didn't show my full run, but they showed a recap. So basically it's like 5 to 7 seconds of different parts of my run. And then I had my name like on the leaderboard. Right. Yeah. So they showed a quick recap of it.
It's interesting because I experienced this a little bit with Forged in Fire. Those TV shows and those networks, like, they don't give a shit about you.
No.
I mean, they're making TV. And it's interesting because they don't give you footage. I don't even know, like, did they say your whole name and where you were from? Like, is it just, Dan, because like even on Forged in Fire, it was, like Josh from Montana. Yeah. And so it's interesting because I think people think that like some of that stuff helps your career more than it does. when ultimately, like they're not putting up your website name. They're not interviewing you. They're not giving you any kind of real airtime. That's like, I mean, it's really what you do with it later on, but it's not really what happens to you from it.
Yeah. And that was my experience too. Yeah, you're right on. I was able to do something with it in a positive light within my community.
Yeah.
That excelled my career as a coach, as a trainer. And so it was a good experience for me for sure.
Right. But you took that and you parlayed it into something.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah, the people that go home and they're like, all right, well, the phone calls are going to start coming in and the money's just going to start rolling.
It's not how it works.
Yeah.
The game's a little different now because when I first started, there wasn't like sponsorships. There wasn't much of the influencing side of stuff happening in 2015, at least for Ninja Warrior. But nowadays, man, I see some of these kids who've got multiple sponsors, everything paid for, and it's a different game now for sure.
So did you, during this whole time of training, that 5 years and whatnot, did you go back to training at your gym or did you end up with your gym?
I ended up going back to another gym.
Okay.
So at that gym, the owners there let me build some obstacles in there. And so I built a salmon ladder, which is like that explosive pull-up bar that you see.
I got to help, though. I got to think that people from the community, that would almost help their gym as well. Like people would find that fun to come train on themselves.
Well, the thing is then I was the only one doing it. And so it was kind of looked at as like this crazy elite kind of thing that people really didn't want to try.
Really?
Yeah, at least people my age. And so I built some obstacles at this gym, and that was the place where I did all of my training. I built my quintuple steps out of plywood and 2x4s. I built the salmon ladder. I built the rock wall, the monkey bar. I built all of it.
Right.
And that was where I trained.
But it didn't get used much by the general public then.
No, it didn't. But what it did get used by was kids.
That's cool.
And that's what I loved about Ninja Warrior is there were so many kids that look up to these guys, to the ninjas. I remember my first time being there. I remember I told you I was by myself. Yeah. I was sitting backstage or alongside the stage there, and one of the announcers, he was like, "Hey, you got some kids over here that want to meet you." And I'm thinking to myself, like, I don't even know who I am. Like, it's my first time here. Yeah. But I go over there, and it's a handful of kids, and they want a high five, and they want a picture, and it's like, I recognize that this sport is so much driven towards the role models for kids. And so what I did is I took that idea and I built it into a program at that gym with the obstacles called Ninja Kids. Okay. And Ninja Kids was an 8-week program where I would see kids twice a week for an hour at a time. The first half of that hour, we would be on obstacles. I would be showing the kids how to do different things. Sometimes we would set up a little ninja course and we would all run through it. And then the second half of the hour, I would get everybody together like circle time, and I would tell them stories from my life about everything we've been discussing. Right. And then I would try to share with them the lessons that I learned. And so it was like this beautiful blend of community and Ninja Warrior, but also like maybe like some life lessons and leadership there. Yeah. And so that Ninja Kids program, man, was a really special thing for me for a few years.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was cool.
That's really cool. Yeah. So again, back to the ultra running. Yeah. Did that kind of come after the Ninja Warrior then?
It did. That was after Ninja Warrior.
So was Ninja Warrior, I say after, was there a hard defining like this is it, it's over, it's done?
Much like
bull riding, I got to that point where I kind of fell out of love with it. Yeah. This is going to sound kind of weird, but it's how I felt at the time. I kind of was only known as like the guy from Ninja Warrior. That doesn't sound weird at all. I know several people that have done different things on television, and just because that's so broadly broadcast, yeah, people just really quickly, they're like, they introduce you as, well, like Laura Zara from Naked and Afraid. Yeah. Right. She's done a lot of things, right? But this is Laura Zara. She's from Naked and Afraid. And it's like, that's not really what she wants to be known for, actually. Like, that's definitely not what's most interesting about her. Yeah. And it's definitely not where her accomplishments lie. Yeah. You could take myself, like Forged in Fires. To some people, they think that's like some big accomplishment. It's like, I got on TV. It really wasn't that hard. I'm a good knife maker. A lot of the knife makers that have on there aren't great. Like, it wasn't a big accomplishment to get on it. I did pretty well on it. But like when I look at like the list of accomplishments in my life, like if there's 20, that's not in the top 20.
Yeah, it's just television.
Not that Ninja Warrior isn't an accomplishment. Like obviously that's part of your story, and it's something you did more than like Forged in Fire I did twice. But like that's not the only thing you should be known for.
Yeah, I would rather be known as a good human, as a guy that is curious about life and passionate about finding the things that really make him tick and pursuing those passions. And that was kind of a big reason why I kind of stepped away from it. I think that in a way that made me somewhat fall out of love with it.
See, I don't
the training.
I don't actually know you well. I mean, it's not like we've, spent a bunch of time together. So like when I followed you and stuff, I don't even know what I would call you.
Yeah, right.
And I hope that's not offensive, but
Thank
like, and I, the point is like, we haven't gotten to it yet, but like you're ultra running, I saw the post and kind of knew some of the stuff about your arena football, and you're building a log cabin, and there's this bull riding thing, which obviously was long before I knew you, but like this whole entire thing is kind of, it's hard to just, you're not a square peg in a square hole, right? It's like there's all these different facets and angles. And I mean, even for myself, from growing up in excavation to making knives to doing lineman stuff to, back to making knives, but in a different way. Like I relate in a way that like, I find a lot of different things interesting.
Yes.
And I feel like life would be, I actually tell my kids, like my daughter, that graduated high school, I think there's all this pressure for her to figure out what she's going to be someday. There's always these pressure on kids to like, what are you going to do? Are you going to be a nurse? Are you going to be a doctor? Are you going to like accountant? And I said, I'm somebody who a lot of people think that I've just had life figured out since I was 11, because that's when I started making knives. But, I made knives, and then I went to college for engineering, and then I duck hunted my way out of college, right? And then I went to work for my dad, and then moved to Missoula and went to work for a different construction company, and then made knives again, and then quit and was going to be a welder, and then I changed to be a lineman, and then I'm back to making knives, right? Like, I don't know what I'll be when I'm 55 or what I'll be doing. Like, who knows, right? The point is like, life is so cool, and there's so much to do. You don't have to just be one thing. And like I told her, you don't have to have it figured out at 19.
Yes.
Agreed. But being the good human part, I always tell my kids, if you can just work hard and be a good person, then all the other stuff will come
as a result,
and you'll figure it out.
Right. Yeah. And growing up, man, as I would like transition from one thing to the next, I remember like my buddies would give me a hard time, or I'd get like some light teasing from them about, well, I thought you were a bull rider. Well, now you're playing football. You're moving to college for that, or I thought you were a ninja. Now you're doing running. Like, what? I'm so confused.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time, like it didn't really hurt my feelings, but like it kind of like stung a little bit, because like, well, what if maybe they're right? Like maybe I am jumping around too much.
Right.
But you know what I've noticed now? I can walk into almost any room in any conversation and find some common ground with people.
Sure.
And it has just made me such a well-rounded guy, because I've done so many different things.
Right.
And I'm so grateful for having that curiosity to go and explore as much as I have. And I tell my kid too, like, you're not just a gymnast. You don't have to just be like a track or a cross country.
Right.
You could do anything and everything if you want.
Right.
And I'll support every bit of it. I'm gonna sit front row and watch.
Right. Yeah, your look today looks a long ways from an NFR cowboy. Right. But you can walk in a room or in a bar full of cowboys.
Yeah.
And they would be probably the most shocked to find that they could have a long conversation with you and tell lots of stories.
Oh yeah.
And that's when you look at the progression of somebody, like I always say, like I don't feel like you know at all who you are until you're like at least 30 years old, 35. Like there's so much change that happens from 18 to 30. So why would you have to be stuck in the same job?
Right.
Right? Like, isn't it natural that, like, when you're 18, 19, 20, you might be into sports and football and being a, this athlete or whatever, but then, like, why can't you transition into and I hate to say this in this way, but like a little more serious person of like a serious career in like, and I don't mean serious because like sports can be obviously, there's cowboys that are 35 that are going to the finals that are very serious about their career, or athletes or training, but like, who says you can't all of a sudden decide you want to become an accountant?
Yeah.
Or a doctor?
Right.
And you're like, well, you're just a football player. And it's like, well, yeah, but now I'm going to put my cleats down and I think I want to become a doctor or a dentist or an orthodontist, or, I want to quit college and go be in excavation. I want to buy a backhoe. I'm tired of, like, I thought I wanted to be an accountant.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to look at numbers all day. I just want to go buy a backhoe.
Dig holes. Right. Right.
Or like, yeah, I helped my neighbor build a shed and I think I want to build houses.
Yeah.
Like, why can't you change your idea of what you want to be and change as your personality changes?
That's right.
Especially
when you just have such a finite amount of time. When I was 13, I had this accident in my family. We call it the car accident. I had this accident. I'm 13. I was a skateboarder at the time. Okay, so here's another chapter.
Yeah.
I was skateboarding to this skater group late at night. It was like a Wednesday night at about, 6 or 7 p.m. It was kind of dark out. And as I was skateboarding there, I came to this this crosswalk at a freeway off-ramp in California. And I didn't push the button, and they had a green light. The light just turned green. As I'm in the crosswalk, this woman at the front of the line of cars runs over the top of me.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. And realizes that she had hit me. So she stops, and she backs up, and still in shock, she drives forward again. And when she finally stops, I'm pinned under the right rear tire. And what's crazy about this story, man, is just the way that it all unfolded. There's a lot of things right there that were in my corner that night. And what I came to find is that, like, I woke up in the hospital the next day thinking to myself, like, people die for less every day.
Yeah.
Why was I saved? Like, what was the reason for that? I got ran over like 3 times. I broke several bones. I'm learning how to walk again in freaking physical therapy right now.
Really?
Why am I still here? We talked about that curiosity thing. Well, that was the thing that sparked that lifelong curiosity for me. It's like, okay, if I was saved for something, I'm going to figure out what that was. And so at a young age, like, that was the thing that was really driving me to want to explore rodeo and football and this and that and travel. And
right.
I just wanted to see what it was that stuck.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned earlier, is that when I was teaching somebody or when I was working with an animal, that was when I felt the best.
Yeah.
And that's what I started leaning into, was that intuition. And so that's kind of why I'm a coach now, because I love to help.
Yeah.
I love to help people. I love to work with people.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like my thing, is that I realized that, okay, maybe I'm here to teach and to help people.
Sure.
And so that's why I do what I do now.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What were your injuries?
I broke my right arm. I broke my right scapula, clavicle, humerus, and right hip. I've got nerve damage in my right arm from my hand up to about mid forearm or so. And basically all of this is like numb and tingly today. And so like, I'll give you like a little test. Number one, like my right arm is shorter than my left arm.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah. So
like 2.5 inches shorter.
Yeah. And then the nerve damage is interesting because it doesn't allow me to have full control over my fingers. So if you extend your hand out and you keep your fingers straight and you just lift your hand, your fingers stay about the same, right? They don't really move a ton. Well, these fingers tend to contract.
Oh, yeah.
As I lift. And that's
interesting.
Part of the nerve damage.
That's actually helpful to catch a football, though.
Right. Right. The ones that go right through me.
Yeah.
I remember in physical therapy, as I was going through all of it, man, I remember this, and my mom laughs because she does too. The physical therapist told me that I probably shouldn't ever take up rock climbing. And later on in life, come to find that rock climbing and Ninja Warrior went hand in hand.
Yeah.
And so I thought about that physical therapist from time to time during my Ninja Warrior years, because here I am rock climbing and training and flying through the air and catching stuff by my fingertips. And like, you know what?
That's cool.
I can do whatever I want.
How long was your recovery in the car accident?
I was in the hospital for about a week. I was in CCU for 3 days and then ICU for the remainder. And then I was out of school for about 30 days.
Wow.
Yeah, I went back home to a hospital bed and did my therapy at the house, did all my like homeschooling at the house and everything.
Did you ever have any conversations with that lady?
You know, interestingly, no. She never came to the hospital. She never made any kind of contact. I don't know if this had anything to do with it, but only thing I know about her is that she worked for the police department.
Oh.
And so she wasn't held accountable for any of it. She never made contact, anything. And I don't know if like maybe that was just her attorney or whatever telling her that, but I know her name. I know the kind of car that she drove and that she worked for the police, and that was it.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was it.
Was it her fault or your fault? Like, because you said you didn't hit the button.
Yeah, so I think it might have been shared. You know, I think that if I would have pushed the button, she wouldn't have gotten that green light. But I think that she also, what she told police was that, remember I was on a skateboard, I had a helmet on, a white helmet. And what she told police is that she thought that what I was a white floating plastic bag coming in front of her because of the white helmet. So she said she didn't see me, she just saw the helmet as a plastic bag. So I think there was shared faults there. Yeah.
Jeez.
That was the start of that whole journey that I started going on with everything.
Yeah. So how did ultra running come about?
Well, when I got to the end of my time with Ninja Warrior, I was training heavy. And one of the things that I was doing was training my cardio system, because in Ninja Warrior, you have to be cardiovascularly fit as well.
Yeah. Because
you're going so fast through these obstacles. And so I would run as training. And towards the end of that time in Ninja, I realized that like I would sometimes put off Ninja training to go run.
Oh, really?
Because I liked to run.
So am I using the right terminology by ultra running?
Yeah, you could say ultra running.
Yeah. So you actually really enjoyed that part of your training.
I did.
Did you enjoy hitting a highway and running as far as you could, or was it all like trails, mountains type stuff?
All mountains.
Yeah.
I mean, I live here in Montana, man. I got Glacier Park in my backyard. I got, Columbia Mountain Range. I got all that stuff. So I would go straight to the mountains.
Yeah.
And I'd sometimes skip Ninja practice to go and run. And so as I'm kind of like detaching myself from Ninja Warrior, spending more time running, I'm finding that this just feels good. There's something about, for me anyways, being in nature, number one, like remote nature, remote wilderness in some of these mountain ranges, and being all out there by yourself.
Yep.
And just running for miles and miles at a time. And you realize that like everything in nature is an athlete. Mm-hmm. It has to be in order to survive.
Yeah, for sure.
And I feel like an athlete. Mm-hmm. Like I feel like I'm part of this ecosystem right now. And it just felt so good. And so it slowly started to take over my life to what it is now.
when you're out running, I'm curious, because like for regular people that go for a run, it's easy to go out and try and shave off 30 seconds or whatever off of a couple miles or something. But like, what are you looking to accomplish when you're out running at a high level like you are now? Are you also trying to shave off 5 seconds off of a mile or two, or are you trying to keep a certain heart rate? Or are you just knowing you need to go put in 6 or 8 miles that day? What is it that you try to accomplish?
I think in the beginning, the big thing for me was, can I go faster? Yeah. And I think that for most people who are just starting out with running, that's the only metric that kind of matters. hours.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened is, like, as I started increasing my mileage and getting more experience with it, what I started to find was actually more of a sexy metric was heart rate.
Okay.
And so nowadays, like, that's really the thing that I'm focused on. If I'm going to be running for 24 to 36 hours straight, I need to manage my heart rate more than I need to manage my speed.
How do you do that?
It's physically, it's slowing down.
Slowing down your pace?
Yeah, slowing down your pace and being more consistent.
So is that slowing down your pace to ultimately keep a better average in the end?
Yeah. That's one of the ways of doing it. But the other thing is, like, you spend so much energy through your own thinking, through your own breathing, through the way that your arms are moving, the way that your hips are moving. And so if I can clean up some of those inefficiencies in training, then that carries over to a lower heart rate. So, for example, if I have a better meditation practice when I'm in training or when I'm just sitting around the house or whatever, it's going to transfer to when I'm in the middle of a race.
What is a, sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
What does a meditation process look like?
So I think for me, what I notice, because I can have like some anxiousness come over me from time to time, and one of the big things is I notice that I get too future focused. Like, I start focusing only on the finish, like when I'm going to be finishing, who's going to be there, what it's going to be like, how tired am I going to be, am I going to be hurt? So the meditation for me allows me to get away from what might happen, and it just brings me back to where I'm at right now.
Okay.
And so in my own life, that has been the most helpful thing when it comes to meditation. It's just getting back to where I'm at right now in my body and in my feet and in my breath.
You talk to a lot of people that have been through BUDS training and like in Navy SEAL stuff and in the SEAL training, and I've talked to a lot of guys that say a ton of those guys that ring the bell and quit absolutely had enough in the tank and had enough athleticism, physical fitness level. They had all of it to finish, right?
Yeah.
It was a mental thing, and a lot of them were focused on hell week, right? Or how many days left they had, or the fact that they didn't know how long they had left, or that they were trying to like get through this week, but it's only Monday.
Yeah.
Like, I got to get through this week. Well, yeah, but there's 6 days left. That's a long time. Especially that's a long time when you're cold, you're miserable, and you're sore.
Yeah, right.
Right. If I told you you're at your most miserable and then you have to do another week of that, you're probably going to say, I don't think so. But they talked about like getting to the top of the hour and then getting to the next top of the hour, or maybe getting like, we just got done, with breakfast, we've done this thing or whatever. Like, I just need to make it to lunch.
Yeah.
It sounds similar to me of like being more focused on small, tiny bites of that process than the entire process, or the finish of a 24-hour race and you're only 9 hours in.
Yeah. If I look at a 100-mile race, the goals change as you go on. And that's like one of the best strategies that I've learned for these bigger races is in the beginning, the goal is to finish, to get to the 100-mile mark. Right?
Yeah.
But the further you go and the more that you struggle and the more that happens, the goal starts to get closer and closer to you. So the goal is no longer the finish line. The goal is, I just got to get to that next aid station, or I just got to get to that next tree.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just like, I need to get to that tree. I've used that so many times.
Really?
And then you just reset. It's like, all right, cool. I just got to that tree. I'm going to run to the next tree. And then I'm going to walk from that tree to the next tree. And then I'm going to run again.
How do you fight off the, like, what you're doing in that race is voluntary.
For sure.
So how do you fight off this is freaking stupid. Why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself through this pain? Why, like, you don't need to do it. You don't have to do it. What you've accomplished in 30 miles is more than most people ever will.
Yeah.
What keeps you in the race and keeps you going?
Well, I think if I look at it like bigger picture for me, I see in my own life that there's so many times where we tend to just pack on layers of things through distractions with phones or media, food, people that we don't need to be around, environments we don't need to be in. We tend to just add on all of these layers on top of us. And what I found to be true is anytime that I'm in situations where I can push myself to a place where I'm just now removing layers and I'm getting closer to the core of who I am and my understanding of who I am, that's when I feel the best. And so as strange as it may sound, it's like when I know that I'm peeling back layers, that just really turns me on. I love being in those situations where it's 3 a.m. and I'm in the middle of nowhere and all I have is my headlamp on and my freaking legs are toast and nobody's around me. And if I look up, all I have is maybe the moon, the stars, my breath, and the next step. And those are the moments where I realize like I'm at my rawest, most pure self. And I loved being there. So I tend to find myself just naturally in those situations or moving towards those situations because I know that there's something that I can learn from that. And I love that feeling.
I think that's a feeling that I don't think that's a feeling I've ever felt. I think that's a feeling very few people actually ever get to.
It's hard, man. It's hard.
Yeah. Especially in a self-inflicted way, right? Like you could get to that feeling maybe through a tragedy, right? Or through a tragic situation that's happening or, a shooting at a concert, right? Where you're literally battling for your own life or in war. There's that with our veterans and people that do that. And that's, I wouldn't call self-inflicted, but definitely they volunteered to put themselves in that situation, though they probably never ever would want to have thought they would maybe get to that level, right? Because you have a team, you have support. So like if you've gotten to that point, there's some things have probably gone wrong. Yeah. But truly, just as a civilian, just completely like self-inflicted, voluntarily, which is it's admirable, and it's a place that very few people ever go to. It's
a gift.
Yeah. How do you tell people who are, super, super out of shape, and it might seem like completely unattainable, right? Like to go from where they're at, like obviously to where you're at, right? With doing ultra running and running 100 miles and stuff like that. But like, how do you tell people in your training career to take that first step and build into maybe say a half marathon?
Yeah. I think the first thing to realize is that all stress is relative. And that's one thing that I think we can get overwhelmed at in the beginning is thinking that because it's popular to run a marathon or 100 miles nowadays, that doesn't have to be the only thing. But instead realizing that what my stress may be just looks a little bit different than yours right now. And so a lot of times, like, I love the idea of having people just go out on a run without any type of attachment to anything, whether it be time, distance, or anything like that at all. And the idea is to go out there and find some type of enjoyment, which if you're just starting to run can sound like an oxymoron, but the idea is you want to find some type of joy in it. Otherwise you're not going to come back.
Right.
And I think that in my own life, that tends to be true as well. When I go into a new thing, seeking out the joy or the excitement piece of it, rather than a metric that at this stage of the game doesn't matter, then I tend to have a better outcome with it as a whole.
A metric that you're probably going to be disappointed with regardless, like when you're brand new, right? If you go run a mile and you haven't run since high school and you go run a mile and it takes you 17 minutes.
Yeah.
Why even measure that? Back because you're thinking back to when you were in 8th grade and you could run the mile in 6:30.
Yeah, right.
Right, because then all you're going to be thinking, I know for myself, like, you go out and do that and then you just think, God, I'm a piece of shit.
Right.
Right, because you remember what you were. I think that's a really good piece of advice, because if you just go out and I would say not even run a mile or 2 miles, but move a mile, meaning maybe it's a run, a walk, right? But if you accomplish a mile or you accomplish 2 miles, that's a mile or 2 miles that you wouldn't have done otherwise. Like, even if you couldn't run the whole thing, like, who cares? Like, at least you went a mile,
No doubt.
or you went 2 miles. And then maybe a month later, you'll find you actually ran the whole mile.
True. And whenever I'm working with beginners, especially in running, I never do mileage-based training programs. I do time-based.
Okay.
Because in the beginning, everybody's time and mileage looks different. So if you were on day one with me and I said, okay, go run 3 miles, well, that could take you 2 hours, right?
Right.
But if instead I said, hey, go run or go move for 45 minutes.
Right.
And detach yourself from distance, but just complete the amount of time and go at your own pace. It's much more sustainable play.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in those situations, the other thing to consider is instead of focusing on a specific result, focus on effort.
Yeah.
Focus on the effort while you're in that time frame. And that goes back to that meditation piece where if I'm focused on effort, well, I'm in the present moment.
Yeah.
But if I'm focused on 2 miles, I'm too future focused, right?
Sure.
So I think that it's important in that situation to, again, focus on effort instead of
Sure.
a specific result.
What do you, when you are running one of those races, what are you trying to keep your heart rate at throughout a race like that? What is a target rate?
For my age, I like to be in that like 120 to maybe 130 range.
Okay.
Like that's my all day range. And if I can stay in that range, no matter where I'm at, no matter how tough it gets or whatever, I'm doing pretty dang good. Sometimes, like if I look at the last 100 miler that I did, I think my average heart rate was like 134. I was a touch above, but if that's my average heart rate over 36 hours and 100 something miles, then I'm happy.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sweet spot it's called zone training. So zone 2 is typically that all day, everyday pace, that conversational pace. So where like if you and I are out running right now, but we're talking like we are, that's typically like a zone 2 pace.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you tell people generally to train in that are just trying to get into shape, right? Just trying to get there. They're not horribly out of shape, but they're definitely not, running fast miles. Like, do you want to be pushing that zone way higher, 160, 170, 180? Or do you want them more down in that 120s, 130s? I
don't even talk about zones with people who are just starting. I think that that's something that can come later. Mm-hmm. But again, I think the big thing that we should be focusing on is effort in a time-based setting.
Sure.
And what I like to do is I like to increase a guy's time by 5, maybe 10% a week. Mm-hmm. And I'll ramp that up for 3 weeks, 5 to 10% each week, and then I'm going to taper it back for 1 week.
Oh.
Does that make sense? So we'll ramp up for 3 weeks, then we kind of deload for 1, and then we ramp up for another 3.
I see.
And so anytime that I'm trying to get somebody to a place of just off the couch or as a beginner to a half marathon, like you were saying, is what is the most sustainable approach?
Right.
And for somebody that's new, it's ramp up for a few weeks and then come back 1.
Sure.
And so it's really minor adjustments in time, in distance, in overall volume.
I got 2 questions for you. One, what is your what accomplishment, and maybe take family out of it, what accomplishment is like the one you're most proud of in your life?
I think it was I told you I lost Coach C, right? Mm-hmm. And everything that happened with their, my whole sob story ended up being like an old country song. It was making the conscious decision to pull myself out of the hole that I put myself in.
What was that hole like? How far in were you?
In a really short amount of time, about 6 months, I had gained 30 pounds because I just stopped caring about everything. I was engaged at the time to my kid's mom. We called off that engagement. Mm-hmm. Because of that, I moved back into my mom's house. I lost my job at work because I couldn't lead my team anymore. I racked up like $40,000 in credit card debt. So this was all the credit card money that I had at the time. I spent all of it trying to go places and do things and buy things that would make me feel better about myself, mm-hmm. which never works, by the way.
Right.
But you know, my truck was also totaled in a car accident all in about
really?
6 months. So all of this stuff happened, man. And I get a call one day, and it's from a buddy of mine. And my buddy was like, "Hey man, I got a guy who wants to work with a personal trainer. Do you want the job?" Now this is 2013, right? And I told you earlier that my business as a trainer kind of tanked around 2008. So I hadn't been with a client in 5 years. And not only that, but I'm at my lowest point in my entire life.
Right.
I'm in nowhere near the shape I need to be in. And while every voice in my head was like, "Nah, man, you're too far gone here," there was like this one little flicker of a voice in my heart that was like, "Go for it."
Yeah.
And so I told Ryan on the phone, I'm like, "Okay, I want to do it. Sign me up. I want the job." And I remember hanging up the phone with Ryan and my anxiety just being at like an all-time high because I had just committed to changing this man's life when my own was a complete dumpster fire.
Sure.
And so what was it going to take for me to be able to do that? And so that was like that gut check moment for me where it's like sink or swim. Like you're either going to figure it out right now,
Right.
or you're going to continue to be a sloppy mess living at your mom's, feeling sorry for yourself.
Right. Right.
And so what that looked like for me was an instant like surge of optimism and energy to go and get back in better shape.
So it gave you purpose.
It instantly gave me purpose. Because remember, I told you, when I'm helping people, I'm on.
Right.
And so that was the thing that did it for me.
Mm-hmm.
And man, I told you I'm 30 pounds overweight. So like, I don't want to go back to the gym because I know that's where all my buddies are going to be.
Right.
And I've always been known as the athlete, the fit dude.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to the place where I knew nobody would see me to get back in shape.
Yeah.
The mountains.
Mountains. Yeah.
Started running. And that's the thing that I'm most proud of. It's taking ownership in my lowest moments that it doesn't have to be this way forever.
And is that also when you started training for Ninja Warrior then?
That was 2 years later.
Okay.
Yeah. It took me a little while to kind of get my life back on track and get in shape. That was early 2014 that
So the
happened.
culmination that really was that when you hit the top of that obstacle at Ninja Warrior,
Yeah.
like you said, that was kind of like like you had really accomplished the full comeback from that
Yeah, that was
low
it.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was it. It was that moment.
Yeah.
It was I wish I could see it. Meaning like I wish I had the video.
Yeah.
I've never seen it. I don't know. I don't remember that moment much other than how it made me feel.
Right.
But
Yeah, it'd be surreal probably watching it now.
I had a guy on social media that hit me up and he was like, "Hey, I work for Ninja Warrior. I knew you were on the show. Where were you at?" And he went back in because he was an editor for the show. And he came back to me a couple days later and he was like, "Man, I saw you finish. I saw you."
Oh, really?
He's like, "I saw you at the top of the wall. I saw you holding the necklace." And I'm like, "Man, send me that video." He's like, "I can't do it."
Damn
it, man.
Yeah.
So I never saw it, but
What's your besides the low point? That was more, I would say, that wasn't a physical disappointment. That was more of an emotional situation that kind of led to what it did. But what was your biggest like sports or professional disappointment?
well, that was about 4 months ago. That was 4 months ago. Let me take you back, man. I'm going to take you back to December of 2022 because this is where it really started. There's this race in Montana, and it's called the Crazy Mountain 100. All right, it's 100 miles over some of the most treacherous, unforgiving terrain in the state, known as the Crazy Mountains, which is native land to the Crow people. All
Yeah.
right? This is all indigenous land, and it's incredibly beautiful and powerful.
Rugged.
I knew nothing about this race until I heard a buddy of mine was running it. And then all of a sudden I just fell in love right away because it hit all of the boxes for me. It was in Montana. It was in real rugged terrain, and it had to do with indigenous land and people,
Mm-hmm.
all the things that I love.
Mm-hmm.
And so I signed up for this race in December, and I knew it was going to be the most challenging thing that I've ever done. And I put my entire being into preparation for the next 7 months for this race. I can't even begin to tell you everything that I did to prepare, but I poured my entire life into this.
Yeah.
And so
how many hours a day? I mean, what's that training look like?
So on average, it was about 2 hours a day. And then on the weekends, I would do what are called long runs. And long runs are anywhere from 3 to 5 hours. And so I would do back-to-back long runs. So sometimes they were 3 hours each day. Sometimes they were 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was anywhere from about, I would say, 40 to 85 miles a week, depending on where I was in the training cycle.
Damn.
Yeah. But basically running every day, strength training every other day.
Yeah.
Mobility every day, stretching every day.
Yeah.
And so the lowest, most disappointing moment in my career in sports was that race. So this crazy mountain race starts on a Friday at 6 a.m. and they give you 36 hours to run this race.
And it's 100 miles?
It's 100 miles with 23,000 feet of vertical gain. So not total elevation, but just
2,300?
No, 23,000. It's
Henry, 23,000 feet of vertical.
Yeah, just the gain though. I'm not talking total elevation either. So,
oh my God,
it's yeah, man, it's a hog. So
100 miles and 23,000 feet.
Yeah. Yeah.
What elevation approximately are you guys running at? I mean, obviously you're up and down a lot. Like, what's low and high?
I think we averaged right around 7,500 or so is where we started. And then we got up to 10,200.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people start experiencing hypoxia.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Up above 10,000, or, even people who aren't from elevation, even at 8,000, 9,000.
Absolutely.
Like, it's a struggle.
Yes, absolutely. And that peak at 10.2, I had to climb twice. And that's one of the reasons that makes this race so unforgiving, man, is you have to go up and down that peak, and then you got to turn around, and then you got to come right back up and down it again. And so,
holy shit.
Yeah, so not only is this like a physically demanding race, but like there's a mental element to that like you really have to focus in on.
So once you've gone up and down that, and you're standing at the bottom of that, and you have to ascend it again, how far into the race are you at that point?
Mile 43.
Okay, so it's pretty much so when you get back to the top of it, you're pretty much at your halfway point?
Yes. Yeah.
So halfway through a 100-mile race, you're staring at that peak.
Yeah, and the sun's just starting to go down, and you realize that I still have roughly 50 miles to go, and it's just now getting dark. It's time to punch in. And that's like a gut check moment for me anyways, because as we were climbing out, I got to the top, sun's going down, you can start to see the stars and the sky's purple, and like you're standing on top of this mountain, and you just feel something. And for me, like, I read and learned a lot about the Crow people before this race because I wanted to be in tune with that. And being up at the top, man, like it made me feel something ancient, and it empowered me to continue to push forward. And it was a cool moment. I remember just being up at the top, and while people were checking out of the race because they were just done.
Yeah, how many people start that race?
I think we had 150 or 170 people start. And the interesting part of this race is after you descend that first big climb, there's an aid station down there. And that's the point in the race where the majority of people realize what they got themselves into. And that's where the majority of people dropped.
After the first climb.
Because remember, you got to turn around.
They know they got to do it again.
Yeah. And not only that, but then they have another 50 miles after that. Yeah. So
yeah,
a big percentage of people in the race drop out after descending that first big climb. And I felt empowered at that moment. I felt something just raw and ancient, and I took off and went another 50 miles. And here's why this is the most disappointing thing for me is you get 36 hours, right? And I was pushing and hustling, and there was a couple times where like I would get to each aid station, and I would get to the aid station literally seconds before they were shutting it down.
So you knew you were on the bubble.
I was on the bubble big time. And I was on the bubble for a couple main reasons. One of them was chafing. I couldn't manage my chafe well, no matter what I was doing. I tried to problem solve it. I couldn't figure it out.
God dang.
And then the blisters, man, there was so much water that my feet were just wet from roughly mile 34 to the finish, and I couldn't keep them dry. And I tried all of the things, problem solved that, but it just didn't work.
Do you have, when you're running, you say you're arriving at these aid stations as they're shutting down.
Mm-hmm.
Are there a few people with you, like, I'm not saying with you like friends, but I'm saying, are there a few competitors that are all in the same boat that you all know you're on the bubble? Is there any discussion going on, any encouragement, or are you just solo?
There, all of it actually. The further you get into the race, the less people are there, because mostly people are dropping out along the way, so you typically don't see as many people. But there is a ton of encouragement. You know, if when I was on the bubble at around mile 77, I ran by a guy, and it was nothing but encouragement for both of us. I was yelling at him to keep going. He was yelling at me. So, like, that's one thing about the ultra running community that I love. It isn't like a traditional sport. It's not like football where it's me against you. In running, it's us against the course.
Well, that's
nature.
what rodeo is.
Exactly.
I mean, it's you and the bull.
Exactly.
And you also can't control the judge. I mean, you can't control the clock.
Yep.
It is what it is. All you can control is you.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's what I love about it. One of the things.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of on the bubble. I'm making it into aid stations. There was one at aid station number mile 78, I think is what it was, mile 78. And I got in there with like probably 2 or 3 seconds to spare. I remember running up to the aid station, and I had to cross a barrier so that my GPS would track me at a certain time. And one of the guys at the aid station grabbed me and like threw me across just to get through on time.
So if you don't get across on time right there, because you're not at the end of the race yet.
Correct.
If you are not on time, do they DQ you right now, right there?
Now, you're done.
Oh,
You're done.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's and
so they're not just saying, "Hey, this is closed. Like, go to the next station for water."
You're going home.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's what makes these races also challenging, is these cutoff times.
Yeah, so they're cutting you out all through the race.
Yep. So I got in by the skin of my teeth, man, on mile 78, and then mile 93, I got to my last aid station. I picked up my final pacer. There's 7 miles to go.
What's
out
a pacer?
A pacer is somebody who runs along with you.
Okay.
To make sure that you're still alive. They're giving you words of encouragement. They're also, in certain times, they're navigating for you, because you're just so deep into a race that, like, if you can take your mental focus away from navigating.
Yeah, you're in a pit of mental hell.
Yeah. So a pacer can be super helpful. And the cool thing was, at mile 93, with those last 7 miles to go, my daughter paced me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it was a really cool thing. She and I started, but we didn't have much time.
So does she have does she know, like, okay, Dad's at this time, he's got to get here at this time. And is she running ahead of you just a tiny bit, saying, like, we got to go?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, we got to.
That's exactly it.
Get your ass in gear.
Yeah, I was so done at mile 93, man. I was out of the mountains, so I was down in the valley, and it was like 7 miles just dirt road and highway to the finish. And she was so sweet, man, but she had no idea what I've been through. And so she was like running a little bit ahead of me, and she turned around, she'd be like, "You're doing great." And I'm like in such pain. I didn't say it, but in my head, I'm like, "Stop talking to me. I don't care. I just want to be done." And we got to about mile 98. All right. About mile 98.
That sounds ridiculous, by the way. 98 miles of running.
Yeah. At this time, I've been running for 36 hours straight, a day and a half. The majority of people have already finished the race. They've already taken their shoes off. They're kicked back, eating a barbecue at the finish line.
Or they've quit.
Or they're on their way home.
Right.
And I'm out here still grinding away, trying to finish this thing. At mile 98, my pace car, there was a car that was running alongside me. That was my soon-to-be wife and a couple of my other teammates. And they're like, "You only have less than 16 or so minutes to go. You need to go." And so I don't know how we did it, man, but one of my pacers got out, one of my teammates ran alongside me and said everything I needed to hear in that moment to go from what I was doing, like an 11-minute mile, down to a 6-minute mile for those final 2 miles of the race.
Damn.
He said everything I needed to hear, and he pushed me, and he got the best out of me for those last 2 miles.
Yeah.
I didn't run a 6-minute mile at any point during that race, but I did at those final 2.
Yeah.
And a lot of people might think, well, that's probably not possible at mile 98. But if you look at my stats on Strava, you can see clearly the times for those last final 2 miles.
Yeah.
So I get to the finish. Everybody's there. I round this corner and I can see everyone at the finish. Everybody is screaming. It's right there. I've got my entire team on foot running alongside me. I'm dead on my feet. I've been dead on my feet. I run across the finish line at a full sprint, and I stand for about 2 seconds, and then both of my knees just buckle, and I fall on the ground. I fucking did it.
Yeah.
I finished. And it was like such an amazing feeling to have my soon-to-be wife, my kid, my whole team. We did it. After a full year,
Right.
we did it. And then I asked the race director who was standing over me, did I make it? The time, because remember, it's a 36-hour cutoff. She says, no, you're 20 seconds late. 12 months, maybe 1,000+ miles of training, countless hours and hours of preparation, thousands and thousands of dollars, all of that for 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Not to mention the 36 hours of the race and everything we experienced there
Mm-hmm.
for 20 seconds. Now, you could look at this and you could be like, well, you know what, Dan, you still finished. You still crossed the finish line. You still did the thing.
Right.
But that depends on what level you want to play at.
Mm-hmm.
You want to play at the novice level, then yeah, pat yourself on the back, check it off your list, and go about your life. Being okay with finishing it, but not doing it the right way. Or you could play at a much higher level, and that level is, if I'm going to play the game, I'm going to play the game by the rules.
Pass, fail.
Pass, fail. That's it. There's no in between. So yes, I crossed the finish line. Yes, I ran every step of the race that was required of me. But did I do it in the amount of time that the race gave me? No, I failed. That was my lowest moment.
Man. Yeah.
And hey, man, for the next day, I tried justifying in my head every reason why I should have finished within the amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
It was only 20 seconds, man. Like, they could have given me a buckle to finish. Like, they didn't have to disqualify me for 20 seconds. Come on, man. Like,
Right.
Really? Give me a break. This isn't Western States.
Right.
This isn't the Barclays or Leadville. Like, this is a race in Montana. I did all of that.
Right.
But none of that matters. The fact is, I was late.
Right.
Pass, fail.
Right.
And so that moment, those 20 seconds have haunted me every single day since July 28th.
Yeah.
And I told myself that there's no in hell I'm not going back to do this thing the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And the day that it opens for registration, I'm going to be the first one.
Yeah. Yeah.
The race opened 2 days ago. I got the notice from the race director. Hey, it's open early. It's not open publicly yet, but if you want to go enter, you can do it.
Yeah.
As soon as I saw that message, I went to the website, signed up, paid my dues. Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I can't even imagine the I can't imagine the pain or frustration like you say with it, the only thing I find that it really compares to is being an Olympic athlete.
Yeah.
And and I don't take this wrong, but like you only prepared for a year.
Not 4.
Oh my God, I can't imagine. Like, and I say only, like you gave everything you had for an entire year, and you don't get, in the NFL, if you fumble the ball, throw the pick, drop the catch, right? Drop the ball. Most of the time you get to try again next Sunday. You get to redeem yourself and, miss the kick or whatever.
Yeah.
There's very few sports that, I cannot, and really the Olympics is very similar to that race from the standpoint that, there's some of the famous people that we know, but generally the Olympians are training in silence, and they're within their own little small communities, but like the rest of the world doesn't know about it and doesn't care.
Yep.
They care when they turn on NBC, and they might even care in the qualifying races, but like they just want to watch you compete in the final race, and then they're pissed off when you take fourth.
Right.
You embarrass the nation.
Yeah, right. That's what they tweet about.
Yeah. Like,
right.
Why do we suck?
Right.
Why is Russia better than us? Or
right.
how did we lose to Austria?
Yeah.
That ski racer sucks. He finished fourth by
right.
0.09 seconds.
Yeah, right.
And he didn't even medal. I can't imagine I can't imagine what you were thinking, what you went through. That would be. Where do you take time off after that? How do you reset and start again?
Well, I think the first thing that I had to do is I had to go through all of the emotion and I had to feel it all. Mm-hmm. I had to write it. I had to speak it. I had to cry it. I had to do all of that, man.
Mm-hmm.
What I realized coming out of that was, okay, now that I've felt everything, I doubt that I could do that again, that I could push myself.
There's that word.
Exactly.
Yeah. I
highly doubt that I could do what I just did again in terms of all of the preparation and sacrifice and training.
Mm-hmm.
I did the best that I very could to prepare,
mm-hmm.
and I still came up short.
Mm-hmm.
And so the big question in my head is, well, maybe this is as good as it gets.
Right.
Maybe I'm not supposed to be 200 pounds and running 100 miles.
How old are you?
I'm 37.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're getting, you're on the wrong side of the prime.
Well, also being 200 pounds, man, I'm the only one out there weighing that much. This is a skinny man's game.
That is another thing that I was, you and I had chatted just a little bit a while ago. Most of those guys are 140 pounds.
Yeah.
That's a huge, carrying 30, 40, 50, 60 extra pounds for 100 miles is, well, just tell anybody, go put on a 60-pound pack.
Right. And then go up and down the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
I think in more recent times that it's come around to where the hybrid athlete idea is catching fire, bigger
mm-hmm.
guys being able to run. And I respect that, but it's different, being my size and running that kind of distance. So that was a big question for me, is maybe this is as good as it gets. Maybe I'm not supposed to do this. Maybe
mm-hmm.
it's time to do something else. But then comes my lifetime of work that I've done in my thinking and things that I've overcome, and realizing that this isn't as good as it gets, really. I can do this and I can be even better next time. But if I'm going to be better next time, I got to sift through all of the noise and the heartache, and I need to extract the lessons from it all. And then I need to discard the rest, which is what I did. So in my phone, I have a list of all of the things that I need to do better next time. I need to, the biggest thing, the first thing on that list is I need to value every second. Yeah. During the race, there were moments where I'd be at an aid station and I would just be like drinking my water and like laughing with the staff,
right,
enjoying it, which is fine. But hey, those 5 seconds add up, don't they?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
If there was one moment where maybe I don't know, maybe
lack of urgency.
Yeah. Maybe I stopped to pee when I really didn't have to, but I just wanted a little bit of a break, right? There's 20 seconds right there.
Yeah.
There's 5 seconds laughing with the people at the aid station. The value of every second matters.
Yeah.
And so that's the next thing, the biggest thing that I'm looking at in terms of this year is every second will be accounted for.
Mm-hmm.
And this year I'm going to do it right. So once I got all of those lessons out, I discarded the rest, but I still had like this lingering bit of like 20 seconds just keeps coming up for me over and over. And so what I've done now is I've taken that for what seems to be still kind of feels like anger, and I've taken that and I've put it to good use. I've taken that energy and I've put it back into my training, and I've allowed it to fuel me through my runs or through my preparation, because I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to use anger as fuel.
Right.
I think that it works really well if you can just manage it.
Channel it right.
If you can channel it correctly, if you can use it for your benefit, which is the way that I've kind of been reconciling this whole thing.
Yeah.
Let that frustration and that anger or whatever push you to do it again.
You know, honestly, let's just say you'd have made it by 20. If you'd have made it by 20 seconds, knowing you wouldn't have felt any better physically,
No.
you'd have felt the same. You'd have known at that point what it took to get there. You'd have had all the sacrifice, the money spent, like all the things that you named in the failure, quote unquote. If you'd have made it by 20, would you be training right now for it again?
Yes. And the reason is because, number one, I know I could do better than 36 hours, you know. Secondly is there's a separate award for people who finish twice.
Oh.
And that award is special to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted that second award. So I was already planning on going back again.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to do it. I want to do it better. I want to do it more efficiently.
The reason I asked that is the failure what you needed to drive you to go again, right? Because if you'd accomplished it, would you look at it? Would you be training today? Because like, what drives you more, a second award or redemption of failure?
Yeah, of course, the latter.
Yeah,
of course,
for sure.
Of course.
Like that award is nice, but like that's not the same as the sour taste in your mouth.
Yeah, no doubt.
You know.
Yeah, and there's something special about the process of training for one of these things that I love. I was telling you when we were down in the shop, man, I'm a process guy, and I want to know every bit of what goes into this thing, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm building this log home right now, and when I've had a couple different trades there that have been doing a thing, I'm one of those homeowners that'll just stand and watch.
Yeah,
because I want to see all of it, man.
How did the log home thing come about? Because so full disclosure, my dad built our log house that I grew up in.
Cool. Okay.
So, I helped peel all the logs when I was a kid. I was little.
Oh yeah.
But I helped peel. I did a ton of peeling. My folks still have the videos of like when we were setting the logs and there was a rope tied to one end, you know, to help kind of guide the log as it's suspended in the air.
Yeah.
I was on the ropes. And I remember my dad scribing the logs, you know, to cope them and make them fit together. I remember a ton of it, even though I was probably 8 or 9.
That's such a cool process.
It's a super cool process. It's something, growing up in a log home, I still have an affinity for log homes. Like, if I ever get wealthy someday, like I still would love to build my own, like a log cabin. Like
yes.
I don't necessarily maybe need a big log home. I have a great home here. If I could just choose, and you said, give me, like your ultimate dream home, it'd be a log home on, a lake or a river or creek or something, but like log.
Yep.
For me, that's it.
Yep. A little trapper cabin or something.
Yeah.
Man.
So like, I don't need a log home. I mean, I can be happy and die where I'm at, but like, I still would love to build a small log cabin, a hunting cabin or something. How did that come along that you just decided to do that?
Well, when I was 17, remember I told you I moved to Montana, right?
Yeah.
Well, when we came to Montana, my uncle, who was kind of behind the idea of us moving here, he was a carpenter and a builder himself, and he lived in a log home on top of a mountain with these beautiful views, and he built the log home himself.
Yeah.
And so my first idea of Montana was living in a log home on a mountain in the forest, And in my head as a young kid, I was like, well, that must just be what people do in Montana. They live in log homes, and you know what I mean? So at a young age, I developed a love affair with that idea. And I thought, oh, well, maybe one day I'll live in a log home too. And so sometimes dreams lie dormant, and this one did for about 20 years. And it finally came to a point a couple of years ago where I bought this piece of property, and I'm like, man, one day I'm going to put a log home there.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do it. Who cares?
Mm-hmm.
A couple of years went by. Fast forward to, what would they be? March of 2023 of this year. And I told Gabriella, I was like, I'm going to do this thing. She rolled her eyes, and I started getting to work. And so I started putting it all together, man. The design that I wanted, I drew out what it was going to cost me, how I could source materials, what I could do myself, because, I have a history in construction too, what I needed to pay a guy because I couldn't. And so I put it all together, and I've been like a maniac on that project since March. Yeah. And it's kind of cool now because, in the fireplace there, I got this big, beautiful, like rock fireplace I'm building. I've got this little 3x5 photo of my Uncle Rick, and it's right over the mantle. And I taped it there. And every day that I'm in there, I talk to that photo. I talk to my uncle, and I'm sharing that experience with him, because I knew that he would be so proud if he was still here. Yeah. To see me doing that project.
That's really cool.
Yeah, he died in 2008, but yeah.
That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
Where are you at on it now?
Well, I just finished up all my interior walls on my drywall. So I've got taping and texturing going on right now. I got all my appliances going in with cabinets next week.
So I mean, you're really getting there.
Yeah, I'm ripping, man. We set logs in September, and it's beginning of December now. So I'll likely be done mid-January.
Did you do all the scribing and all that work, fitting the logs together?
Nope, I didn't do that part. So I hired an Amish crew out of Libby, Montana.
Okay.
To do the log package. And so what we agreed on is they would set the logs, set the doors, set the windows, and then I'll do the rest.
Yeah.
And so I've done everything else myself outside of the electrical and the plumbing.
Yeah, I've seen you with all the Instagram videos with the tool belt on and
yeah, man,
working like crazy on that thing.
Like freaking maniac out there. But
that's awesome.
It's been cool, man. It's just kind of like we talked about with the meditation thing. I'm taking every second of this build to heart, and I'm really enjoying the process, no matter how exhausted I may be. Yeah, I only get to do this one time. Right. Or at least in my head, I'm only going to do it once. Yeah. But I'm going to make the most of it.
Yeah. So what do you do? What do you do for, day job? Yeah. Pay the bills.
So I'm a coach. And so what I do is I work with people who have created a business, but maybe have sacrificed their health along the way for the growth of that business. And what I teach them to do is to reintegrate health and fitness into their busy, crazy business life. And so I teach them through a set of ideas that have been really helpful for me as I was doing the same thing when I first started regaining control of my health about 10 years ago now.
Are you doing it? Is it all in person? Is it all online?
Yeah,
combination?
It's a combination of both. I think what I really enjoy the most are these retreats that I hold throughout the year. And I do two different types of retreats. One is where people come to Montana after 12 weeks of hard training with me, and we run a big run in the mountains together, upwards of a marathon to 30 miles. Wow. And then the other type of retreat is where folks come up and they stay with me for a weekend, and we do a deep dive into the thing that they want to resolve the most. And put an action plan together for that. And so what a lot of my work is, honestly, it's just asking good questions. It isn't so much of me telling the person what they need to do, but it's kind of guiding a person along with, insight. And again, maybe I can ask some good questions that they can use to help formulate those answers on their own. Yeah. Very cool. Do you stay super busy with that? I got to think you have a ton of people. Yeah. So the retreats are awesome, man, because I do them throughout the year. The running retreat is every August, but those weekend ones are always just throughout the year, each month. But I stay busy year round with that. Yeah. And then the other piece that I do is I have a vacation rental business in Montana.
Okay.
I'm proud of Montana. I'm proud
Yeah.
of its history. I'm proud of what it represents. And people who come here, I want to give them a unique experience with it. So I have properties with yurts on them, with teepees, and with now a log home.
That's
And,
awesome.
yeah, we're gonna make it real special.
Dude, the yurts are so cool.
They're so cool, man.
My buddy has one up by Flathead, and
Yeah,
I've said, like, as expensive as homes are, if I was a young kid and I could buy a piece of ground, just the property, because that's what's most valuable is get that piece of dirt. If I was some young single kid or a young guy with a young wife or whatever, you know, the cost of construction of a you know, typical custom home is so insane and so ridiculous.
yes,
I'd buy a yurt. I would put a yurt up with a wood stove in it. You know, yeah, when his wood stove goes out and if he's not there, you know, freezes. There's ways to mitigate that or whatever, but like, you know, and it can always be a guest house someday when you build your someday house. But
absolutely.
compared to paying rent somewhere, I would put a yurt on it and live in a yurt in a hot second.
And they're so nice too, man. I put my yurt up in 2.5 days.
Yeah.
And I had everything in place.
Yeah.
You know, and it was so easy to do.
Yeah.
The flooring in actually took me longer than the actual structure. So
he put a deck all kind of around his, to live outside, and then framed a couple walls inside. So if, you know, you had a set of friends come over, there's a couple bedrooms so you can go change and have privacy.
Cool.
Like half the yurt is like 2 bedrooms, and you know that, and then the other half is just big open living space and kitchen, and it's phenomenal.
Yeah, they're cool, man. They're really cool, and they've got a really cool history behind them too. So, yeah, pretty special.
They're neat. Well, man, thanks for coming down. I think it's like I said, I don't know how to define you, what to call you. When did the dreads start? I got to ask that.
Yeah, man. All right. So that goes back to like my running, the beginning of the running thing for me. Now, remember I told you I was in a really low spot, right?
Yeah.
The hair, I was already growing out at the time, so I really didn't have an intention of locking it like this. But being at that really low point in my life, I started getting out into nature and running. And I started noticing something that, like, if you've ever been depressed or had any issues like that, you know that every moment that you're awake is like hell to be in a depressed place. And that's how I felt too. But that 1 hour or so that I would go out into the mountains and I would like run because I'm trying to regain control of my life, I felt like freedom. Because there was this thing with being in nature and getting those good hormones flowing that like did something for me. It made me feel good. There was the idea of getting closer and closer to the top of the mountain and overcoming the obstacle, right? And so I get about 2 weeks into running, and I'm like, well, maybe I'll bring some music into this. And I had listened to reggae music since like high school, but I was never really understanding it. And so when I started bringing in reggae music with nature, with that good hormone release, it was like this trifecta of healing that was going on for me. Because in the music, it isn't just smoking weed and getting high. Like if you really listen to like the roots reggae music, it's about positivity. It's about self-sufficiency. It's about discipline. It's about community. It's about honor. It's all of those things that I wasn't getting in my life from anybody else at that time. And so in a way, man, I feel like reggae music weaved its way into my life at the perfect time that was kind of mentoring me in that initial stage of healing. And there was so much about the idea of reggae and Rastafari that I identified with. And when it came time, I was like, well, this makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And so that was the decision that I made to lock my hair. And I'm so glad that I did, because Rastafari has been this stabilizing force in my life ever since.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's wild. I remember, well, it was probably 3 years ago I started following you, and your hair was, you know, you were you know, you had some hair, but it was definitely not, it's definitely not to the length it is now. Even today you walked in, I'm like, damn, it's growing. Like,
yeah. Whenever I see photos, man, I could tell you exactly where I was in life before even like looking at what was going on in the photo. I just look at my hair length, like, oh yeah, that was around that time.
that extra weight might have cost you 20 seconds in your race.
Less aerodynamic.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll trim it up next time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh man. I think what you do is super cool. I really respect all the different stuff that you've done in life, and you're still young. So it's been a full life of things already. It's really cool.
Yeah. Seems like it.
Such an interesting array of different phases of life and different things. And I think it's a great example for especially young kids to see that are stressed out about feeling like they have to conform to society and telling them like you have to figure it out and you have to know what it is here and now. Yeah. And then also that you can't change, right? Like, I have talked at some high schools and stuff, and I've told kids, you know, I was a journeyman lineman making, you know, $100,000 a year with benefits and, you know, 401k and like all the things that like society tells you that like that's where you want to get to in life, right? 6-figure job, benefits, paid vacation, all the things like the security, right? And, you know, I quit that, right, to chase this dream, which was completely maybe stupid when I did it. At the time, unorthodox, right? Crazy. Yeah. You know, my own parents were just like, you know, they struggled, you know, as you know, in the excavation world as blue collar hard workers. Like, you know, my dad was, you know, said several times, like, that's probably a route he should have taken way back when, because like he beat his head against the wall and worked his ass off for so many years and didn't have paid vacation, didn't have benefits, and didn't have any guarantees, right? So like when I was quitting that, he was like, I don't think you should be doing that. But the point is like, you can never lose if you chase your dreams, you know, ultimately in life, like you said, you only have so much time. So like if you're chasing those dreams and you're putting in your full effort and you're doing your best, like even if you quote unquote fail, you're going to learn something from it and you're going to end up doing something else. And eventually you're going to find some success. But even in those failures, you're going to grow as a person.
Relentless curiosity.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's it.
Yeah.
More life, just continuing to find the things that make you feel on.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I can't wait to see the video of you crossing the finish line under 36 hours this year.
I've been training ever since. I can't wait to.
Is that July?
July 26th. It's on.
All right. Can't wait to see it, man. Where can people find you?
I'm on social media at Rasta Runner. You can find me.
Okay.
Instagram I'm at mostly, and I do my best to respond to everything. So if you listen to the podcast, shoot me a message. Let me know what you think. Hope it was helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, man. Do you have a website for like your training stuff?
Yeah, everything's danholguinfitness.com.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm more so active on social. Hit me up there.
Yeah. Awesome, brother. Well, I appreciate it.
Appreciate you, man.
Yeah.